The rope burns on her wrists weren't from restraints. They were from hauling herself out of the Thames at 3 in the morning, dress dragging like iron chains, lungs screaming for air that tasted of sewage and rot. Elara Whitcomb had been married exactly 14 hours when someone decided she was better off dead. The water had swallowed her scream. The darkness had promised relief. But she'd clawed her way back to the docks anyway, fingers splitting on barnacles, because drowning was too quiet an exit for a woman who just realized the entire system wanted her erased. Now stick with me, because this story doesn't end in that river. It ends in Parliament, in drawing rooms, in whispered threats that toppled men who thought themselves untouchable. Drop a like, leave a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Let me show you what happens when the woman they meant to silence decides to burn the whole game down instead. The carriage wheels hit every broken cobblestone between Whitcomb Manor and London like they were personally offended by the journey. Elara pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the countryside bleed into industrial smoke, her reflection ghosting over fields that no longer belonged to her family. "Sit properly," her mother snapped from the opposite bench. Margaret Whitcomb's face had the tight, preserved look of a woman who'd spent 20 years pretending financial ruin wasn't eating through the walls. "You'll meet the Duke looking like a market girl pressed against shop windows." Elara didn't move. "Does it matter what I look like? The contract's already signed." "It matters," her father said quietly, "that you understand what you're saving." Charles Whitcomb had shrunk in the past year. Not physically. The man still filled his coat the way minor nobility always did, all broad shoulders and manufactured authority. But something inside him had collapsed. The gambling debts had started as gentlemanly recreation and metastasized into existential threat. 3 estates mortgaged, creditors circling, the family name, carefully polished across 2 centuries, about to shatter against the reality of bankruptcy and social extinction. Enter Adrian Blackmore, Duke of Thornfield, with a problem of his own. His first wife had died in childbirth 2 years prior. Society had mourned appropriately, then started whispering. A duke without an heir was a title without a future. His family's solicitors had been discreetly shopping for a solution, young, fertile, desperate enough not to ask questions. The Whitcombs had been very, very desperate. "The settlement clears everything," her father continued, voice careful, like he was explaining something to a child instead of selling one. "The estates return to us unencumbered. Your brothers keep their commissions. Your sister can still marry. And I," Elara said, "become a broodmare with a fancy title." Her mother's hand cracked across her face fast enough to blur. "You become a duchess," Margaret hissed. "You become the solution to every mistake this family has made, and you will do it with grace, with silence, and with gratitude that a man of Thornfield's standing would even consider someone of your position." Elara's cheek burned. She tasted copper, but she didn't touch the mark, didn't give her mother the satisfaction of seeing it hurt. "I understand," she said flatly. "I'm the price, the payment, the thing exchanged to balance the ledger." "You're a woman," her father said, and somehow that was worse than her mother's slap. The resignation in it, the inevitability. "This is what we do, sir." The Duke's London townhouse stood in Mayfair like a threat in marble. 5 stories of Georgian perfection, windows blank as dead eyes, iron fence separating it from the street like a moat. Elara stepped from the carriage feeling like Marie Antoinette approaching the guillotine, historically inevitable and thoroughly doomed. A butler materialized at the door. Ancient, impeccable, face like carved stone. "Miss Whitcomb," he intoned. Not a question. His grace is in the study. No welcome, no warmth, just geography. Her parents weren't invited inside. This was business, and business didn't require witnesses. Her father squeezed her shoulder once. Guilty? Useless. Her mother straightened Elara's traveling cloak with hands that trembled just slightly before catching themselves. "Make us proud," Margaret whispered. Elara wanted to laugh, to scream, to ask exactly what pride looked like when you just sold your daughter to a stranger. Instead, she walked inside. The entrance hall swallowed sound. Black and white marble stretched toward a staircase that curved up into shadow. Portraits lined the walls, Blackmores across generations, all sharp noses and sharper eyes, staring down with expressions between contempt and boredom. "This way." The butler moved like a ghost. Elara followed through corridors that smelled of beeswax and old money, past rooms shut tight behind doors that probably hadn't opened in years. The house felt abandoned, not empty, abandoned, like something living had left and only the shell remained. He stopped at a door, knocked twice, waited. Enter. That voice. Elara had heard it once before, 3 weeks ago, when Adrian Blackmore had visited Whitcomb Manor to inspect his purchase. He'd spent 20 minutes in her father's study, emerged with signed papers, nodded once in her direction without quite meeting her eyes, and left. She'd learned more about horses her father sold than about the man she'd marry. The butler opened the door. Adrian Blackmore stood with his back to her, staring out windows that overlooked a garden strangled by late autumn. Tall. Dark coat fitted perfectly across shoulders that held themselves like military training had carved them from stone. Hair black enough to drink light. He didn't turn around. "Miss Whitcomb," he said, "you'll forgive me for not providing ceremony. I assumed we'd both prefer efficiency over theater." Elara stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind her with the finality of a cell locking. "Your Grace," she managed. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "The wedding is scheduled for tomorrow at 11, he continued, still not looking at her. "St. George's, Hanover Square. Small ceremony, immediate family only. The solicitors have prepared the settlement documents for your father's signature this evening. You'll move your belongings here tonight. Mrs. Harding will show you your rooms." "My rooms." Plural. Separate. "Of course." "Yes." Finally he turned. "I trust that's acceptable." Elara had prepared herself for many things: cruelty, condescension, the entitled brutality of aristocratic men who viewed wives as property. But Adrian Blackmore's face hit her differently because it hit her with nothing at all. He was handsome the way marble statues were handsome. Perfect proportions. Cold features. Eyes the color of winter oceans, looking at her with the same investment one might show reviewing furniture inventory. "Acceptable?" she echoed. "Good." He turned back to the window. "I'll be frank, Miss Whitcomb. This marriage serves a practical function for us both. You require financial security and social elevation. I require an heir. I expect discretion, basic competence in household management, and minimal disruption to my existing arrangements." Existing arrangements. She shouldn't push. She knew she shouldn't push. "Such as?" Now his jaw tightened, barely, just enough to show she'd touched something. "Such as my time, my privacy, and my freedom to conduct my affairs without interference or dramatics. You will have the same liberties. I don't require a companion, Miss Whitcomb. I require a wife in title and function, nothing more." The words landed like stones, each one deliberate, each one designed to establish exactly how much she should expect from this arrangement. Nothing. She should have stayed quiet, should have nodded, accepted, played the grateful rescued woman. That's what her mother would have done, what every manual on wifely duty demanded. Instead, Elara heard herself say, "And what happens if I want more?" Adrian went very still. "More," he repeated slowly. "More than being a duchess? More than wealth, status, and freedom most women in your position couldn't dream of? More than being a clause in a contract?" The silence stretched. Outside, a crow landed in the dead garden and started picking at something in the frozen flower beds. When Adrian spoke again, his voice had dropped to something dangerous. "Let me make this exceptionally clear. I buried a wife 2 years ago. I watched her die slowly, painfully, because I got her pregnant and her body couldn't survive it. I will perform the necessary functions to produce an heir because the title demands it, but I will not pretend this is a love match. I will not offer you affection I don't feel, and I will not tolerate attempts to manufacture intimacy where only obligation exists." He moved closer, not threatening, precise, like a surgeon making an incision. "You want more," he said quietly. "Then I suggest you find it in your charitable committees and tea parties and whatever pastimes occupy women of your station, because you will get nothing from me beyond the protection of my name and the comfort of my wealth. Are we understood?" Elara's throat felt tight. Not from tears. She'd run out of those somewhere between debt collectors in this moment. From rage. Pure, crystalline, clarifying rage. "Perfectly," she said. "Excellent." Adrian stepped back. "Mrs. Harding will attend you. The ceremony is at 11. Don't be late." He walked past her, left the study, left her standing there among the dead man's books and the smell of old leather, and she understood with absolute clarity she'd just signed herself over to a beautiful, breathing tomb. Mrs. Harding turned out to be a weathered woman in her 50s with suspicious eyes and an accent that marked her as working class risen to minor authority. She led Elara upstairs without speaking until they reached the third floor. These were the first Duchess's rooms, Mrs. Harding said, opening a door onto a suite that looked like it hadn't been touched since the funeral. His Grace said you could redecorate as she liked, as if changing curtains would matter. The sitting room connected to a bedroom connected to a dressing room, each space larger than Elara's entire bedroom at Whitcomb Manor. Expensive furniture, heavy drapes, everything perfect and suffocating. The first Duchess, Elara said carefully. What was she like? Mrs. Harding's expression flickered. Sweet girl, too young, married His Grace when she was barely 17, her mouth pressed thin. Pregnant at 18, dead at 19. The words landed heavy. Did he love her? Love? Mrs. Harding laughed, sharp and bitter. He married her because the families arranged it, same as you. Difference was, she thought she could make him care. Killed herself trying. That's not what killed her, isn't it? Mrs. Harding met her eyes directly. Girl spent 2 years breaking herself against that man's indifference, then spent 9 months dying to give him a son that came out stillborn anyway. You ask me, the childbirth just finished what the marriage started. She moved toward the door. Bit of advice, Your Grace. You'll have the title tomorrow. Might as well use it. Don't waste yourself trying to warm a man made of ice. Find something else to care about. You'll live longer. The door closed. Elara stood alone in a dead woman's room, surrounded by expensive things that meant nothing, and felt the full weight of tomorrow settling over her like a shroud. She walked to the window. Down in the garden, that crow was still there, tearing at whatever it had found in the frozen ground. Find something else to care about. The thought crystallized slowly. If Adrian Blackmore wanted a wife and title only, if he required nothing from her but biological function and social appearance, then everything else was hers. Her time, her choices, her purpose. She'd been handed a fortune and complete indifference. Most women would have seen it as punishment. Elara was beginning to see it as possibility. The wedding happened exactly as Adrian had described. Efficient, bloodless, transactional. St. George's smelled of incense and old prayers. Elara wore a dress her mother had commissioned on credit, white silk that cost more than most families earned in a year. Her father walked her down an aisle toward a man who looked at her like she was an appointment to be checked off. Dearly beloved, the priest's voice droned. Adrian's hand on hers felt cold even through her glove. He spoke his vows like reciting legal testimony, clear, exact, empty. She repeated hers in a voice that didn't shake. The ring slid on, heavy gold, his family crest pressed against her finger like a brand. You may kiss the bride. Adrian's lips brushed hers for exactly 1 second. Professional, sterile, a requirement fulfilled. And just like that, Elara Whitcomb became Elara Blackmore, Duchess of Thornfield. The breakfast afterward was worse. Her family desperately grateful, trying not to show their relief at being saved. Adrian's relatives coldly polite, assessing her like livestock at market. The Dowager Duchess, Adrian's mother, sat at the head table radiating aristocratic disapproval, making it clear that new money saving old money was still just money, not breeding. You'll find running the household quite simple, Lady Blackmore said, voice acid sweet. Adrian requires almost nothing. His late wife found time for extensive charitable work. The Ladies' Hospital Aid Society would welcome your involvement. Translation: stay busy, stay useful, stay out of sight. I'll consider it, Elara said. Adrian barely spoke. He sat beside her like a statue, responded to toasts with minimal courtesy, and checked his pocket watch twice. When propriety finally allowed escape, he stood abruptly. The carriage is ready. No, shall we? No choice, just fact. They rode back to the townhouse in silence. Elara watched London scroll past, crowds and commerce and 1,000 lives happening behind windows. Freedom she'd lost. Possibilities traded for survival. At the house, Adrian helped her down with mechanical courtesy and immediately turned toward his study. I have business to attend to. Dinner is at 8. Dress appropriately. He disappeared. Elara stood in the entrance hall, wedding dress suddenly feeling like a costume, and started laughing. Quiet at first, then harder, until Mrs. Harding appeared looking alarmed. Your Grace? I'm fine, Elara managed. I'm just... She waved at the empty corridor where Adrian had vanished. I'm married to a man who can't stand to look at me. My family sold me to save themselves, and apparently I'm supposed to find meaning in organizing charity teas. Mrs. Harding's expression softened, just slightly. You want my advice? I really do. Stop waiting for permission to matter. You're a duchess now. That title opens doors even dukes don't see. Use them. She left before Elara could ask what she meant. Dinner was excruciating. Adrian sat at the opposite end of a table designed for 20, reading correspondence between courses. They didn't speak. The food was excellent and tasted like sawdust. At 9, he stood. I'll be in my study. Don't wait up. Wait up, Elara repeated. For what? His pause held volumes. Good night, Elara. Her name in his mouth sounded wrong, too intimate for what they were. She went upstairs to the dead woman's rooms and dismissed the lady's maid Adrian had hired. She didn't want help undressing, didn't want witnesses to whatever breakdown might be coming. But when she finally stood in her nightgown, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror, she felt oddly calm. This was the rest of her life. This cold house, this indifferent man, this gilded cage. She could spend it trying to win affection from someone who'd made it clear he had none to give. Could waste herself like the first duchess, breaking against Adrian's frozen walls. Or, the thought crystallized, or she could do exactly what Mrs. Harding suggested. Stop waiting for permission. Stop existing in the margins of Adrian's life. She had wealth now. Status. Access to circles she'd never enter as a bankrupt gentleman's daughter. And she had something else. Something Adrian had accidentally handed her when he said he didn't require companionship or involvement. She had freedom. The clock struck 10. Somewhere in the house, Adrian was working, not thinking about her, not caring what she did. Perfect. Elara opened her wardrobe and started planning. The next morning, she woke early, dressed in a simple day dress, walked downstairs to find Adrian already gone. Business in Parliament, the butler said. Expected back late. I'd like the carriage, Elara said. The butler's eyebrows rose. For what purpose, Your Grace? Does it matter? A long pause, then, of course not. Where shall I tell the driver to take you? Elara smiled. She'd spent 3 hours last night thinking about this, about what she'd seen driving through London yesterday, about the parts of the city her carriage had skirted, the neighborhoods deemed too rough for gentle eyes. Whitechapel, she said. The workhouses. If the butler was shocked, he hid it well. As Your Grace wishes. The carriage rolled east through the city's transformation, Mayfair's clean streets bleeding into industry, wealth giving way to survival. The London most aristocrats never saw. Soot-black buildings, gin shops, narrow alleys where the sun didn't reach, women in threadbare dresses hauling water, children with bare feet and old eyes. Poverty not as distant tragedy, but immediate reality. The workhouse loomed like a prison. Gray stone, barred windows, the smell of unwashed bodies and institutional cruelty, even from the street. Your Grace, the driver said nervously. This isn't... Ladies don't... Wait here, Elara said. She knocked. A matron answered. Middle-aged, suspicious, taking in Elara's expensive dress with narrow eyes. We don't do tours, she said flatly. If you're here for charity theater, write a check and leave us to work. I'm not here for theater, Elara said. I want to help. Help? The matron barked a laugh. You want to feel good about yourself by handing out bread once a month? We got enough of that. What we need is someone who'll stay when things get ugly. Then I'll stay. The matron studied her, really looked. Something shifted in her expression. You mean that? I mean that. A longer silence. Then, Abigail Ross. I run this place, though run is generous. Mostly I keep people from dying faster than they already are. You really want to help? Yes. Then come back tomorrow, 6 in the morning. Wear something you don't mind ruining, and bring a strong stomach, Duchess. This isn't your pretty drawing rooms. This is what happens to women with nowhere left to go." The door closed. Elara stood there feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. She came back the next morning, and the morning after that, and the one after that. Abigail put her to work immediately. No ceremony, no gentle introduction. Washing floors, emptying chamber pots, serving gruel that barely qualified as food, listening to stories from women who'd fallen through every crack society had to offer, prostitutes who'd gotten too old or sick to work, widows whose families had disowned them, girls pregnant and abandoned, women whose only crime was being poor in a city that criminalized poverty. They didn't trust her at first, Duchess swooping in to play savior. But Elara kept showing up, kept working, didn't flinch from the ugliness or turn away from the anger. And slowly, they started talking. "My husband took our wages," one woman told her, stirring a pot of stew that was mostly water. "Every penny I earned, he'd drink or gamble. When I tried to leave, he had me committed, said I was mad. Took me 2 years to convince the doctors otherwise. The factory owner fired me when I got pregnant," another said. "Didn't matter that it was his son who forced me. I was ruined. He got promoted." "I had a business," a third woman added, bitter. "Seamstress, good work. Then my husband died and his brother claimed everything, said women couldn't own property. Courts agreed. Took me 6 months to end up here." Story after story, pattern after pattern. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. Women had no legal identity separate from fathers or husbands. No property rights. No recourse. One bad marriage, one cruel employer, one moment of vulnerability, and the only safety net was the workhouse. And the workhouse was designed to punish. "What you're seeing," Abigail said one morning, watching Elara scrub blood from floorboards, childbirth gone wrong in the night, "is the truth rich people pay to avoid. These women aren't here because they failed. They're here because the game was rigged from birth." "Then we changed the game," Elara said. "With what? Good intentions?" Abigail laughed, exhausted. "I've been fighting this for 20 years, Duchess. The system protects itself. Men who could change it benefit from it. Women who suffer from it have no power to challenge it." Elara sat back on her heels, scrub brush in hand, dress already ruined. "But I do," she said slowly. "I have power now. Money, status, access. To do what? Write checks? That helps one or two, leaves the rest to rot. No." The thought was crystallizing. To create something different, not charity, infrastructure, a way for women to help each other survive, to fight back. Abigail studied her. "You're serious." "I'm serious." "Then you're either brave or stupid, probably both." She stood, joints cracking. "Come with me." She led Elara down to the workhouse's cellar, damp, dark. At the back, behind a false wall, a room. Inside, 20 women, meeting in secret, talking in whispers. "This," Abigail said, "is what resistance looks like when you have nothing. We share information, hide each other's earnings from abusive husbands, help girls escape brothels, document crimes that police ignore. We're small, powerless, but we're trying." The women stared at Elara, wary, angry, desperate. "If you really want to help," Abigail continued, "don't give us money. Give us what you have that we don't. Legitimacy, access, the ability to speak where people listen." One of the women stood, young, hard eyes. "You want to change things?" she said. "Then stop being a duchess playing at poverty. Use that title. Make them hear us." Elara looked around the room, at women who should have been invisible, were meant to be forgotten. "Tell me what you need," she said. And they did. "What?" She came home late that night. Adrian was in his study. She could see lamplight under the door. She thought about knocking, telling him where she'd been, what she'd found, then remembered he didn't care. Good. Over the next month, Elara built her network carefully. She started with money. Adrian's money, technically hers now, allocated to household management. He never asked about expenses. Probably assumed she was spending it on dresses and furniture. She was spending it on lawyers, specifically young solicitors hungry for work and willing to take cases other firms wouldn't touch. Women fighting to keep custody of children, widows battling relatives over property, workers documenting factory abuses. She couldn't win every case. The law was too stacked. But she could make it expensive, could tie up courtrooms, could create paper trails that made predatory behavior public. "You're making enemies," Abigail warned her. "Men talk. They're noticing. Let them notice." She expanded next into employment, not just charity jobs, real work. She convinced shop owners she knew through her new social circles to hire women from the workhouse. When they hesitated, she offered to cover the first month's wages herself. When the women proved competent, the jobs stuck. She started a lending system, small amounts. Enough for women to rent rooms, buy tools, start businesses. Not charity. Loans with fair terms, documented carefully, creating alternatives to predatory lenders who trapped women in debt spirals. And she started collecting information. Every story she heard, she recorded. Names, dates, patterns. Which factories had the highest injury rates? Which landlords were known for demanding sexual favors in lieu of rent? Which magistrates could be bribed to ignore domestic violence? Which police could be paid to look the other way? "What are you doing with all this?" one woman asked, watching Elara fill another notebook. "Building a weapon," Elara said. Truth, documented carefully enough, becomes harder to ignore than lies. She moved through two worlds now. Days in workhouses and tenements, learning the architecture of poverty. Evenings in drawing rooms and theaters, learning the architecture of power. She attended every social function required of her station, smiled through tedious conversations, built relationships with wives of politicians, businessmen, judges, and listened. Always listening. "My husband's factory is so profitable this quarter," one woman bragged at a dinner party. "Though between us, they've had some trouble with workers demanding safety improvements. Ungrateful, really." Elara filed that away. Found out which factory. Got statements from workers who'd lost fingers to unsafe machinery, sent them to newspapers alongside the owner's wife's comments about profit. She became very good at seeming harmless. The pretty young duchess, naive and sweet, asking innocent questions that made men brag and confess without realizing what they were revealing. Adrian noticed eventually. She'd been in his study once, looking for stationery, legitimately, when papers on his desk caught her eye. Parliamentary committee assignments. He was on the board reviewing industrial safety regulations. She didn't ask permission. She took notes. That night at dinner, one of the rare occasions they ate together, he said, "I heard you've been spending time in Whitechapel." Elara's hand stilled on her fork. "I have." "Why? Does it matter?" "It matters," Adrian said carefully, "if you're drawing attention that reflects on this household." "Attention," she set down her fork. "Would that be the attention from helping starving women, or the attention from documenting which factory owners are violating safety laws you're supposed to be enforcing?" His eyes went cold. "Excuse me?" "The Parliamentary Committee on Industrial Oversight. You chair it. I've seen the reports on your desk. You know the violations exist. You've done nothing about them. You've been reading my private papers. You've been ignoring preventable deaths." The silence stretched. "What exactly," Adrian said, voice dangerously quiet, "do you think you're accomplishing?" "More than you are." She stood, left him sitting there. It was the longest conversation they'd had since the wedding. 3 months into her marriage, Elara received an invitation to Lady Rothschild's winter gala. The event of the season, everyone who mattered would attend. She wore blue silk. Diamonds Adrian's family vault had provided, arrived beside her husband looking every inch the perfect duchess, and spent the evening systematically cornering every woman whose husband held power. "My husband mentioned your Mr. Morris is pushing for deregulation," she said to one, smile bright and empty. "How exciting! Though I imagine the workers affected might feel differently. Someone should document their perspective. For balance." The woman's smile froze. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Of course not," Elara said sweetly. "Lovely speaking with you." She moved through the ballroom like a shark through shallow water, planting questions, dropping information, making connections between wives who'd never thought to speak to each other about their husband's business. She found Adrian watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. When they got home, he followed her upstairs. Unprecedented. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I don't know what you mean." Don't play games, Elara. You're up to something. Multiple people tonight made pointed comments about my wife's unusual interests. And that bothers you. I thought you wanted me to find activities to occupy myself. I'm occupied. With what? Some misguided crusade to single-handedly reform society? Would that be so terrible? It would be impossible, Adrian snapped. And dangerous. The men you're antagonizing don't respond to embarrassment with reform. They respond with retaliation. Then let them try. You think your title protects you? That I can shield you from consequences indefinitely? Elara turned on him. I think you've done nothing to shield anyone from anything. I think you sit in your committees and sign your papers and tell yourself you're serving while women die in factories you could shut down with one vote. So forgive me if I don't take advice about danger from a man who's chosen comfortable complicity. She'd gone too far. She knew it immediately. Adrian's expression went blank, the same emptiness he'd shown at their wedding, the same nothing that meant everything. I see, he said quietly. Then by all means continue your crusade. Just don't expect me to catch you when you inevitably fall. He walked out. Elara stood alone in the corridor, heart hammering, realizing she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Good. She didn't need his protection anyway. Well, the next morning she found a letter slipped under her door. Your Grace, you've made powerful enemies. Charles Hayward, the industrial magnate, knows you're investigating his operations. He's planning retaliation. Be careful. A friend. Elara stared at the note. Charles Hayward, owner of half the textile mills in London, notorious for brutal labor practices, documented injuries, and enough wealth to buy silence from anyone who might object. She documented everything. Worker testimonies, injury rates, evidence of child labor. She'd been planning to go public through a sympathetic newspaper editor. Now Hayward knew. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt her spine straighten. If he wanted a fight, she'd give him one he wouldn't forget. She dressed carefully, went downstairs, found Adrian in the breakfast room, reading the Times. I need access to your solicitors, she said without preamble. He looked up slowly. Why? Because I'm about to be sued for libel, and I want to win. For the first time since their wedding, something flickered across Adrian's face. Not anger, something harder to define. What? He said very quietly. Have you done? Elara smiled, sharp as broken glass. I've stopped disappearing, and she walked out to set the world on fire. The newspaper hit Adrian's desk at precisely 8 in the morning, delivered with his coffee like a grenade disguised as breakfast. The Times, respectable broadsheet of the establishment, carried a headline that made his jaw tighten. Factory conditions under scrutiny, Duchess of Thornfield challenges industrial practices. He didn't need to read further to know exactly who'd planted the story. Elara was already gone. Her carriage had left at dawn, the footman reported nervously when Adrian demanded to know. Whitechapel again. The workhouses. Places a duchess had no business haunting like some avenging ghost in expensive silk. Damn her, Adrian muttered, scanning the article. Worker testimonies, injury statistics, safety violations at Hayward Textiles specifically named and documented. And there, buried in the 6th paragraph, a quote attributed to sources close to the Duchess of Thornfield about the moral obligations of those in power. His mother was going to have apoplexy. The parliamentary committee was going to demand explanations. And Charles Hayward was going to come for blood. Adrian's hands clenched on the paper hard enough to crumple the edges. He'd warned her, explicitly, that these men didn't forgive, didn't forget, and sure as hell didn't respond to public shaming with gracious reform. But Elara hadn't listened. Of course she hadn't listened. The girl he'd married to solve a problem had become a problem herself. And worse, a problem he couldn't ignore anymore. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. The butler materialized instantly. Your Grace, your appointments, canceled. All of them. Tell anyone who asks I've been called away on urgent family business. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Family business. The wife he'd tried to keep at arm's length had just painted a target on both their backs, and he'd be damned if he let her face the consequences alone. Even if she clearly thought she didn't need him, especially because she thought she didn't need him. The carriage made terrible time through morning London. Adrian spent it alternating between fury and something uncomfortably close to fear. Not for himself. He'd weathered political storms before. But Elara had no idea what she'd just triggered. Hayward owned half the city council, had magistrates in his pocket. The kind of man who made problems disappear. And if a duchess became inconvenient enough. Adrian forced the thought away. When they finally reached Whitechapel, the driver looked ill. "Your Grace, I really don't think—" "Wait here. Keep the doors locked." Adrian stepped into the street and immediately understood the driver's concern. This wasn't poverty. This was destitution weaponized into architecture. Buildings that looked one strong wind from collapse. Gutters running with things he didn't want to identify. The smell of too many bodies in too little space, desperation thick enough to choke on. A group of men leaning against a gin shop watched him with calculating eyes. His coat alone probably cost more than they'd see in a year. He found the workhouse by following the smell of lie and institutional despair. Knocked hard. The woman who answered, sharp-eyed, middle-aged, thoroughly unimpressed, looked him up and down like he was something tracked in on a boot. "We don't want prayers or platitudes," she said flatly. "If you're here to feel good about yourself, bugger off. I'm here for my wife." Her expression shifted. "You're the Duke." "I am. Where is she?" "Doing more good in 3 months than men like you manage in a lifetime." But she stepped aside. "Cellar? Through the kitchens, down the stairs? And Duke? She doesn't need rescuing, remember that." Adrian descended into dimness that smelled of damp stone and mold. At the bottom, lamplight leaked around a door. Voices, women's voices, arguing. "Told you this would happen," someone was saying. "You poked the bear. Now the bear's going to maul you." "Then I'll maul back." That was Elara. Calm, determined, completely insane. "We knew there'd be retaliation. We planned for it. We planned for legal threats, not—" The voice dropped. "There are rumors, Elara. Hayward's connected to some very ugly people, the kind who don't bother with courts. You think I'm afraid of threats? I think you should be." Adrian pushed the door open. 20-odd women went silent. They stared at him, suspicious, hostile, protective. Elara stood at the center, hair escaping its pins, ink staining her fingers, surrounded by papers and ledgers, like a general planning a campaign. She looked exhausted, alive. Nothing like the hollow girl he'd married. "Adrian?" His name in her mouth sounded startled. "What are you doing here?" "Apparently preventing you from getting yourself killed." He held up the newspaper. "The Times, Elara." "You went to the Times?" "I went to 3 papers. The Times was the only one with enough spine to print it." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes." She lifted her chin. "I've made it impossible for Hayward to sweep his practices under the rug. I've given voice to workers who've been silenced for years. You've declared war on a man who crushes his enemies for sport. Then he can try crushing me." The room held its breath. Adrian became aware of every woman watching them, judging him, judging this, waiting to see if he'd do what powerful men always did. Shut her down. Shut her up. Send her home like a child who'd misbehaved. He looked at his wife, really looked, at the fire in her eyes that hadn't been there on their wedding day, at the way she stood, not afraid of him, not asking permission, just existing fully in her own conviction. And he realized with uncomfortable clarity that he'd underestimated her catastrophically. "We need to talk," he said. Privately. Elara's jaw set. "Anything you need to say, you can say in front of them." "I don't think you want that." "Try me." "Fine. If she wanted an audience for this, she'd have one." "Charles Hayward doesn't lose," Adrian said quietly. "He doesn't compromise. When workers tried organizing at his Manchester mill 3 years ago, the leaders disappeared. Just gone. Never found. The investigation concluded they'd left town voluntarily, but everyone knew better. That's who you've just antagonized in print." The women shifted uneasily, but Elara didn't flinch. Then maybe it's time someone stood up to him anyway. Bravery without strategy is just suicide with better publicity. And silence without courage is just complicity with better manners. She stepped closer. "You sit in Parliament and pretend not to see. These women live in the consequences of that blindness. So forgive me if I'm not interested in your warnings about danger when danger is already here. It's just that now it might actually touch someone who matters to you. The hit landed. Adrian felt it like a physical blow. That's not fair. Isn't it? Elara's voice shook, not with fear, with rage. You've had power your entire life. You could have changed things years ago. You chose not to. These women don't have that luxury. They can't choose to look away from their own suffering. And She stopped, started again. I'm done pretending I don't see it either. Adrian stared at her. At this woman he'd married thinking she'd be invisible, manageable, silent. This woman who'd taken his indifference and turned it into fuel for something he didn't entirely understand but couldn't quite dismiss. What exactly do you want from me? He asked. Nothing. I stopped waiting for your help months ago. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Elara turned back to her papers. Go back to Parliament, Adrian. Vote on your committees. Maintain your comfortable distance. I have work to do. Dismissed. She'd just dismissed him, a duke, in a Whitechapel cellar in front of an audience of working-class women. He should have been furious. Instead, he found himself asking, what kind of work? She looked up sharply, surprised. I'm sorry? You said you have work to do. What kind? The women exchanged glances, testing whether he meant it. Finally, Elara gestured to the table. We're building a network, women helping women survive. We document abuses, factory conditions, landlord exploitation, domestic violence that police ignore. We connect women who need work with employment that won't destroy them. We provide legal assistance for cases the courts don't think matter. And we make it harder for men like Hayward to operate in darkness. By exposing them, by making their crimes public record, by creating paper trails that can't be erased, by giving voice to people society pretends don't exist. Adrian moved to the table, scanned the documents spread across it, testimonies, injury reports, financial records that must have taken months to compile. Meticulous, detailed, damning. This is remarkable, he said quietly. Elara blinked. What? This work. It's remarkable, reckless and dangerous, but remarkable. The silence that followed felt different, uncertain. I don't need your approval, Elara said finally. I know, but you might need my help. Why would you help? 3 months ago, you made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with me beyond legal obligation. 3 months ago, I didn't know you were waging a shadow war against industrial corruption. Adrian met her eyes. I still think you're being reckless, but I'm also beginning to think you're right. One of the women, the sharp-eyed one who'd answered the door, laughed bitterly. That's rich. Duke suddenly grows a conscience when his wife makes him look bad. Abigail, Elara started. No, she's right, Adrian interrupted. I've been complicit. I've told myself I was being pragmatic, choosing battles, working within the system, but the system protects itself. It protects men like Hayward, and women like you. He gestured at the room. Pay the price for that protection. He turned back to Elara. You asked what I want. I want to help. Not because you need me, but because this... He touched the papers. This is more important than my pride or my political comfort. Tell me what you need. Elara studied him like she was seeing him for the first time, evaluating, deciding. Protection, she said finally. Hayward's going to come after me, legally first, libel suits, defamation claims. But if that doesn't work, he'll get creative. Yes, then we make it so he can't afford to. Adrian's mind was already working through possibilities. I'll speak to the parliamentary committee. Push for an official investigation into factory conditions. If Hayward's practices come under formal government scrutiny, attacking you becomes attacking the investigation itself. He has friends in Parliament. So do I. And unlike him, I have a title that predates most of theirs. That still counts for something. Adrian pulled out a chair, sat. Show me everything. If we're going to do this, we do it properly. Build a case so airtight he can't wiggle free. The women looked at each other, some skeptical, some cautiously hopeful. Abigail crossed her arms. And what do you get out of this, Your Grace? Redemption? A chance to play hero? Honestly, Adrian said, I get to stop pretending I don't see what's right in front of me. I get to stop being the kind of man who looks away because it's convenient. He glanced at Elara. And maybe I get to know my wife. Actually, know her. Instead of treating her like furniture I'm obligated to maintain. Elara's expression softened, just barely, Just enough. All right, she said, but understand this. I'm not stopping. Whatever happens, whatever threats come, I'm not backing down. I wouldn't expect you to, Adrian said. In fact, I'm counting on it. For the first time since their wedding, they smiled at each other. Real, uncertain, but real. It lasted approximately 10 minutes. That's when the constable arrived upstairs with a warrant for Elara's arrest. The door crashed open. Heavy boots on stairs, a voice booming, "By order of the magistrate, I'm here for the Duchess of Thornfield." Every woman in the room tensed. Elara went pale but didn't move. Adrian stood slowly. On what charges? The constable, red-faced, already sweating, appeared in the doorway flanked by two officers. He held a paper like a shield. "Criminal libel, Your Grace. Defamation of character. Mr. Hayward has filed formal charges. I'm authorized to take the Duchess into custody." "Like hell you are." "Sir, I don't want trouble." "Then you shouldn't have brought it to my doorstep." Adrian moved between the constable and Elara. "My wife has committed no crime. Printing truthful information isn't libel. That's for the courts to decide. Now, Your Grace, please step aside." "No." The word hung in the cellar like a blade. The constable's face reddened further. "Sir, I have a warrant. If you obstruct, then you'll what? Arrest a duke for protecting his wife from spurious charges filed by a man trying to silence her?" Adrian's voice went cold. Aristocratic. Every inch the nobleman who could make careers end with a word. "Go back to whatever magistrate signed that warrant and tell him the Duke of Thornfield says he can shove it up his bought and paid for." "Adrian," Elara's hand on his arm, steady. "It's all right." "It's not all right. It's expected. We knew Hayward would use the courts." She looked at the constable. "I'll come willingly, but I want it noted that I'm cooperating fully and maintain that everything published was factually accurate." "Elara, no." "Yes." She squeezed his arm. "Let them arrest me. Let them make it public. It'll only prove what we've been saying about how the system protects powerful men." Adrian stared at her. This woman who'd somehow become braver than he'd ever been. "I'm coming with you," he said. "You can't watch me." The constable looked between them, clearly regretting every decision that had led to this moment. "Your Grace, you're not under arrest. Then I'm volunteering. You take my wife. You take me too. Let's see how Hayward likes explaining why he's prosecuting a duchess while her duke stands beside her in the dock." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Elara said quietly, "Together then. Together." They walked upstairs side by side. The women followed, Abigail and the others, witnesses to this small revolution. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Word spread fast in Whitechapel. They watched in silence as the constable helped Elara into the police wagon, as Adrian climbed in after her, as the door closed on the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield being hauled away like common criminals. Someone in the crowd started clapping, slow, deliberate. Then someone else joined. And another. Until the whole street was applauding, not mocking, celebrating, these forgotten people watching power held accountable for once, watching a duchess choose them over comfort, watching a duke finally stand for something that mattered. Inside the wagon, Elara and Adrian sat on opposite benches. The constable looked miserable. His officers looked confused. "You didn't have to do this," Elara said. "Yes," Adrian replied. "I did." Why? He thought about that. About the question underneath the question. Why now? Why her? Why care after months of deliberate indifference? "Because you were right," he said finally. "I've been hiding behind procedure and protocol while pretending I was serving something. But you walked into the mess and started fixing it without permission or protection. You made me see that bravery isn't waiting for the perfect moment. It's just choosing to act when you could choose to look away." Elara's eyes shone, not quite tears, something fiercer. "You know they're going to make an example of us." "Probably. Your mother will never speak to you again." "Not sure that's a punishment." Despite everything, Elara laughed, sharp and startled. "Adrian Blackmore making jokes. I didn't know you were capable." "Turns out I'm capable of quite a lot when sufficiently motivated." "And what's motivating you now?" He looked at her, this woman he'd married without seeing, dismissed without knowing. "You are." The wagon rattled through London toward the courthouse, toward whatever came next, toward consequences they'd face together instead of apart. And for the first time since their wedding, Adrian felt like they might actually be married after all. The courthouse steps were chaos. News had traveled faster than the wagon, reporters everywhere, notebooks out, shouting questions that blurred together into incomprehensible noise. Elara's arrest had become the scandal of the season. Duchess charged with libel by one of England's richest industrialists. The implications were enormous. The crowd parted reluctantly as they walked through. Adrian kept his hand on Elara's elbow, proprietary, protective, making it absolutely clear whose side he'd chosen. Inside, the magistrate's chambers felt like a trap. Small room, heavy furniture. The magistrate himself, Alderman Green, sat behind his desk looking like he'd aged 10 years since morning. "Your Graces," he said wearily, "this is highly irregular." "Then dismiss the charges," Adrian said. "I can't do that. Mr. Hayward has filed formal complaint. Mr. Hayward is attempting to use the courts to silence my wife because she exposed criminal negligence at his factories. That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact. We have testimonies, injury reports, financial records showing systematic safety violations." Green's hands trembled slightly as he shuffled papers. "Your Grace, I'm sure you understand my position. Your position is that you owe your appointment to men like Hayward, and crossing him means losing that appointment." The magistrate's face went red. "I resent the implication. Resent it all you like. We both know how this works." Adrian leaned forward. "But here's what you may not know. I'm formally requesting a parliamentary investigation into industrial safety practices, specifically at Hayward Textiles. My wife's documentation will be submitted as evidence. If you prosecute her for libel while that investigation is pending, you're putting yourself on the wrong side of official inquiry. Is protecting Hayward worth your career?" Green looked trapped, calculating. The math wasn't in his favor, and he knew it. "I'll need time to review the evidence," he said finally. "You'll need to dismiss the charges." "Your Grace," Alderman Green. Adrian's voice went deadly quiet. "My family has held power in this country for 300 years. We've weathered civil wars and revolutions. We don't make threats lightly, and we don't forget who stands with us. Choose carefully." The silence stretched. Finally, Green cleared his throat. "I'll review the evidence. The Duchess will be released on her own recognizance pending further investigation. But she's not to leave London, and she's to cease all publication of inflammatory material." "That's not," Elara started. Adrian squeezed her arm gently. "Agreed. Pending full dismissal of charges once your review is complete." Green nodded, looking grateful for the escape. Court adjourned. Outside, the reporters descended again. Adrian raised a hand for silence, and got it, because dukes still commanded that much even in modern times. "My wife has been released," he said clearly. "The charges are under review. We remain confident they will be dismissed entirely once the evidence is properly examined. In the meantime, I've formally requested a parliamentary investigation into workplace safety practices. We look forward to cooperating fully with that inquiry." "Your Grace," a reporter shouted, "is it true the Duchess has been secretly organizing workers?" "My wife has been documenting labor abuses and providing assistance to those harmed by negligent practices. She's been doing so with my full knowledge and support." That wasn't quite true. But it was true now, and that's what mattered. Another reporter. "What do you say to accusations that the Duchess is overstepping her station?" Adrian looked at Elara, at this woman who'd refused to stay in the margins assigned to her. "I say," he replied, "that my wife understands her station better than most. A duchess has power. She's simply choosing to use it for something that matters. I admire her for it. England should too." The reporters scribbled frantically. This was better than scandal. This was revolution with titles attached. They made it to the carriage through a forest of questions. Only when the door closed did Elara finally let herself shake. "That was terrifying," Adrian offered. "Exhilarating." She laughed, breathless. "We just faced down a magistrate, threatened a criminal investigation, and turned my arrest into a publicity victory." "We did, didn't we?" They looked at each other. And for the first time since they'd met, Adrian saw his wife clearly, not as obligation or burden or mistake, but as partner. Ally. Someone worth standing beside instead of behind. "Thank you," Elara said quietly. for coming, for helping, for finally pulling my head out of my aristocratic backside. I was going to say for seeing me, but yours works too. Adrian reached across the carriage, took her hand. Her fingers were ink-stained and cold and strong. I see you, he said. Finally. And I'm sorry it took this long. Elara's thumb traced his knuckles. We have work to do. Mountains of it. Hayward's not going to stop. No, he'll escalate. Are you sure you want to be part of this? It's only going to get uglier. Adrian thought about that. About the man he'd been 3 months ago, comfortable, distant, deliberately blind. About the man he could choose to be now. I'm sure, he said. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Agreed? Elara squeezed his hand. Agreed. The carriage rattled through London toward home, toward whatever retribution Hayward was already planning, toward a future they'd build together instead of separately. And Adrian realized something that should have terrified him, but instead felt like relief. He was falling in love with his wife. The woman he'd married thinking she'd disappear had instead become impossible to ignore, and he had absolutely no intention of letting her face the consequences alone. They reached the townhouse as twilight bled into evening. Adrian helped Elara down, noting how exhaustion had finally caught up with her, shoulders tight, face pale under the lamplight. Inside, Mrs. Harding waited with an expression somewhere between approval and concern. Your Graces, there's been activity while you were gone. What kind of activity? Elara asked. The kind where 3 solicitors, 2 newspaper editors, and your mother showed up demanding audience. I told them you were indisposed. Adrian sighed. My mother or Elara's? Both, actually. It's been an interesting afternoon. I can imagine. He turned to Elara. Go rest. I'll handle the fallout. No. Elara straightened. We do this together, remember? Elara. Together, Adrian. He looked at her, stubborn, exhausted, absolutely refusing to yield, and felt something in his chest tighten with what might have been pride. Together, he agreed. Though fair warning, my mother makes magistrates look friendly. Then I'll fit right in with her. They walked into the drawing room side by side, ready to face whatever came next, and Adrian thought, This was what partnership looked like. Not perfect harmony, not comfortable agreement, but 2 people choosing to stand together even when the ground was shaking beneath them. And as they entered to find both their mothers waiting with matching expressions of aristocratic fury, Adrian caught Elara's eye and saw the smallest smile. They were in this now, completely, irrevocably. The woman meant to disappear had instead pulled him into the light with her, and he'd never been more grateful for anything in his life. The lawsuit arrived within 48 hours. Not just 1, 3. Charles Hayward had mobilized an army of solicitors, and they came at Elara from every angle. Defamation, interference with business operations, criminal libel. The papers were delivered to the townhouse at breakfast, thick packets of legal threat wrapped in official seals. Adrian read them in silence, face carved from ice. This is serious, he said finally. Hayward's claiming £50,000 in damages. That's enough to bankrupt most families. Elara poured tea with steady hands. But not yours. That's not the point. He slammed the papers down. The point is he's not actually after money. He's after you. These lawsuits are designed to drag through courts for years, to destroy your reputation, to make an example of what happens when someone challenges men like him. I know. You know. Adrian stared at her. You knew this would happen and you did it anyway. Would you have preferred I stay silent? I would have preferred, he said, voice tight with something that almost sounded like fear, that you not put yourself directly in the crosshairs of one of the most vindictive men in England. Elara met his eyes, really looked at him. The Adrian who'd married her out of obligation had always seemed untouchable, distant, cold, perfectly controlled. But the man sitting across from her now had cracks showing, tension in his jaw, fingers gripped too tight around his coffee cup. Are you actually worried about me? She asked. The question landed between them like a grenade. Adrian stood abruptly. I'm worried about the scandal. I'm worried about what this does to my family's name. I'm worried that my wife has apparently developed a suicide wish disguised as social reform. But not worried about me. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He turned toward the window, shoulders rigid. You don't understand what you're up against. Hayward owns judges. He owns newspapers. He owns politicians who owe him favors going back decades. He will destroy you. And He stopped. You what? Elara pressed. I can't protect you from this. The admission came out raw. Not without destroying everything I've built. My position in Parliament requires neutrality. Taking your side publicly means losing every political alliance I have. It means becoming a liability instead of an asset. It means choosing me over your career. The silence stretched. I can't do that, Adrian said quietly. I won't. Something in Elara's chest cracked. Not surprise, she'd known this was coming. But knowing and hearing it said out loud were different animals. Then don't, she said. I didn't ask for your protection. I don't need your permission, and I certainly don't need you to sacrifice your precious political neutrality. She stood, walked past him toward the door. Elara, save it. I have lawyers to hire. She left him standing there, and part of her wanted to feel triumphant, independent, strong. Mostly, she just felt alone. Marcus Webb turned out to be exactly what she needed. He was 32, hungry, and had a reputation for taking cases no respectable solicitor would touch. His office sat above a printer's shop in Cheapside, cramped, paper-strewn, smelling of ink and ambition. Your Grace. He didn't stand when she entered, just gestured to a chair stacked with files. Move those anywhere. I'd offer tea, but I'm out of cups. Elara cleared the chair and sat. Mr. Webb, I know what you need. You need someone willing to fight Charles Hayward in court, knowing he'll spend 10 times our budget and own half the jury. You need someone stupid enough to think documenting worker deaths is worth getting disbarred over. You need someone with nothing to lose. He grinned, sharp and dangerous. Lucky for you, I'm exactly that stupid. She liked him immediately. Can we win? She asked. Win. Webb laughed. Duchess, we're going to get slaughtered. Hayward's lawyers will tear apart every piece of evidence you have. They'll question every witness until they recant. They'll drag your name through papers he owns until you're the villain and he's the victim. We will lose every legal battle. Then why take the case? Because, Webb said, leaning forward, sometimes losing in court means winning everywhere else. You've got something Hayward can't buy, moral high ground. Every day this trial runs, every piece of evidence we present, every worker who testifies about conditions in his factories, that's publicity he can't control. The court of public opinion doesn't require a verdict to render judgment. He pulled out the documents she'd given him. Her notes. Worker testimonies. Records of injuries and deaths. This is good work. Thorough. But it's not enough. Hayward will claim it's hearsay, manipulation, lies from disgruntled employees. What we need is something he can't dismiss. Something undeniable. Like what? Internal documents. His own records showing he knew about the dangers and ignored them anyway. Letters, memos, account books showing he prioritized profit over safety. How am I supposed to get those? Webb's smile widened. That, Your Grace, is where things get interesting. The plan was insane. It was also the only option. Hayward kept his primary offices in a building near the Royal Exchange, 4 stories of commercial enterprise with his personal office on the top floor. During business hours, the place was fortress. After hours, the only security was a night watchman who made rounds every 2 hours. You're suggesting I break into a factory owner's office and steal documents, Elara said slowly. I'm suggesting nothing, Webb replied. I'm simply noting that if certain documents happen to materialize, they would significantly strengthen our legal position. That's the same thing. Is it? He shuffled papers innocently. Elara thought about Adrian, about his warnings, about choosing between safety and action. When? She asked. Webb's grin could have lit fires. She brought Abigail and 3 women from the workhouse network. Women who knew how to move quietly, pick locks, and disappear into shadows. Skills acquired from survival, not choice. This is mad, Abigail muttered as they watched the building from an alley across the street. We get caught. You lose everything. We get caught. We go to prison. Probably hang. Then we don't get caught, Elara said. That's your plan? Don't get caught? Do you have a better one? Abigail snorted. Yeah, go home. Forget this. Live your nice Duchess life and let someone else be the martyr. I can't do that. Why not? Elara watched the night watchman complete another round, watched him settle back into his booth with a flask and a newspaper. Because if I don't, she said quietly, then what was the point? Why did I survive my family selling me? Why did I end up with money and access and power, just to waste it staying safe? Most people would say yes. I'm not most people. The watchman's lamp dimmed as he settled in. 2 hours until his next round. Now, Elara said. They moved. The back entrance yielded to Sally's lockpicks. Girl had steady hands and a past she didn't discuss. Inside smelled of machine oil and old paper. They took the service stairs, avoiding the main corridors, moving by feel more than sight. Hayward's office was locked. Naturally. Sally worked on it while Elara kept watch, heart hammering so loud she was sure someone would hear it 3 floors down. Click. The door swung open. Inside, mahogany furniture, leather chairs, walls lined with filing cabinets. Organized wealth. Systematic exploitation dressed up as legitimate business. 15 minutes, Abigail whispered. Then we leave whether we found anything or not. They split up. Elara took the desk, rifling through drawers with hands that tried not to shake. Bills of sale, contracts. Nothing useful. The filing cabinets were locked. Sally, on it. While Sally worked the locks, Elara found a safe behind a painting. Of course there was a safe. Rich men always had safes. She stared at it, knowing she had no way to open it, knowing that whatever Hayward most wanted hidden was probably, Your Grace. Maggie, one of the other women, stood by the cabinets holding a folder. Look at this. Internal memos. Dated over 5 years, factory managers reporting safety concerns, equipment failures, injury rates climbing, and Hayward's responses written in his own hand. Repairs cost too much. Make do. Injuries are the cost of employment, their choice to work there. Compliance with new regulations would cut profits 30%. Ignore until forced. Holy hell, Abigail breathed. He documented his own negligence. Men like him always do, Elara said. They're so sure they're untouchable, they don't bother hiding. Why would they? Who's going to challenge them? We are, Maggie said grimly. They took everything. Documents, correspondence, account books showing he'd been fined for violations and simply paid the penalties rather than fix the problems. A paper trail of calculated cruelty. Time, Abigail hissed. We need to go. They were halfway down the service stairs when they heard it. Voices. Below them. Coming up. Told you I saw movement. Someone's in the building. The watchman. And he'd brought help. Back, Elara whispered. Back up. Now. They retreated, heard footsteps on the stairs, getting closer. The roof, Sally suggested. Fire escape on the east side. They ran, no longer trying to stay quiet, just trying to escape. Burst onto the roof into cold November air, found the fire escape, started climbing down. Stop! A shout from above. The watchman leaning over the roof edge. I've called the police! You're trapped! They weren't trapped. They were 3 stories above an alley with a rusty fire escape that groaned under their weight. Elara looked down, looked at the women with her. Ordinary women who'd risked everything because she'd asked them to. Go, she said, all of you. I'll stall them. Like hell, Abigail snapped. We're in this together. No. If I get caught, I'm a duchess doing something scandalously inappropriate. If you get caught, you're criminals who'll hang. Go, now. She didn't wait for agreement. She climbed back up, emerged on the roof to find the watchman staring at her in shock. Your Grace? Good evening, Elara said, brushing dust from her dark coat. I seem to have gotten turned around looking for the Ladies' Aid Society meeting. This is rather embarrassing. The society doesn't meet in factory buildings at midnight. Doesn't it? How strange. I must have misread the invitation. He wasn't buying it, but he also wasn't sure what to do with a duchess caught breaking into a building. The class hierarchy was doing exactly what Elara needed, creating hesitation. I'll need to report this. he said slowly. Of course. Do report it. To whom exactly? Mr. Hayward? I'm sure he'll be fascinated to learn I was touring his facilities. The implication landed. She'd been caught, yes, but she'd also been in his office, could have seen anything, done anything. I think, Elara continued, we can both agree this situation is highly irregular. I propose we forget this evening ever happened. I'll leave quietly. You'll continue your excellent work securing the premises, and no one need know about any confusion. The watchman's jaw worked. He was trapped too. Reporting a duchess meant attention, investigation, questions about what she'd been doing and what she might have found. Out, he said finally. Now. And if I ever see you again, you won't. She walked past him, took the main stairs, let herself out the front door. Abigail and the others were waiting 2 streets over, concealed in shadows. Did we just... Maggie started. We just stole enough evidence to bury Hayward, Elara finished. Now we need to use it before he buries us. Webb nearly kissed her when she delivered the documents. This is... I can't... Your Grace, this is everything. His own words, his own hand. Proof of deliberate negligence spanning years. Can we use it in court? Can we use it? Webb laughed wildly. We don't need to use it in court. We leak it to every newspaper in London. Let public opinion convict him before the trial even starts. Won't that compromise the legal case? The legal case is already compromised. Hayward owns half the judges, but he doesn't own public sentiment. Not yet. Elara thought about it, about the risk, about stepping past even the appearance of proper channels. Do it, she said. All of it. I want every paper in the city running this story tomorrow. Webb's hands were already moving, sorting documents. You understand this is the point of no return? Once this goes public, Hayward will come at you with everything, not just lawsuits, real retaliation. Let him come. She meant it, Wolcham. The story broke like a bomb. Industrial magnates' documents reveal deadly negligence. Hayward factories profit over lives. Duchess exposes systematic worker exploitation. By noon, it was on every front page. By evening, it was all anyone discussed. The scandal wasn't just the conditions, it was the proof. Hayward's own memos, his own calculations showing he'd chosen profit over human life. Public outrage erupted. Workers walked off jobs. Customers boycotted products. Politicians who'd been in Hayward's pocket suddenly discovered urgent concerns about industrial safety. And Hayward himself went silent. For 3 days, nothing. No response, no counterattack, just silence. Elara should have known that was worse. But the retaliation came at dawn. She woke to pounding on the bedroom door. Mrs. Harding's voice panicked. Your Grace! Your Grace, wake up! Elara threw on a robe and opened the door. What? Fire! The workhouse in Whitechapel. It's burning. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they did, and Elara was running. No time for proper clothes. She grabbed a cloak, threw it over her nightdress, ran downstairs. The butler was trying to stop her. Improper, dangerous, wait for his Grace, but she was already out the door. She found a cab, paid the driver triple to go fast. Whitechapel at sunrise looked like hell had opened. Smoke column visible from streets away. Crowds gathering. Fire brigade already there, but the flames were winning. Elara pushed through. Found Abigail on the street, soot black, coughing. How many inside? Elara demanded. 40, maybe 50. We got most out, but the upper floors... Abigail's voice broke. The stairs collapsed. They're trapped. Who? Women. Children. The ones too sick to move fast. No. Elara stared at the burning building, at the top floor windows where she could see faces, screaming, pounding, trapped behind flames. Someone has to... She started. No. Abigail grabbed her arm. You can't. The building's coming down. Then we have minutes. She pulled free. Ran toward the building. Your Grace! The fire chief tried to stop her. You can't go in there. Watch me. She'd never done anything like this. Never been in a fire. Never had to face physical danger instead of social danger. But those were real people up there. Women she knew, had talked to, had promised to help. She couldn't let them burn. The heat hit her like a wall. Smoke immediately choking. She wrapped her cloak over her mouth and pushed inside. The ground floor was chaos. Burning furniture. Collapsed beams. The air itself seemed to be burning. She found the back stairs. Stone, still mostly intact, started climbing. Second floor. Worse. Flames crawling across walls. Heat so intense her skin felt like it was cracking. Third floor. The door was jammed. "Help!" Voices on the other side. "Someone help us!" Elara threw her shoulder against it. Once, twice. Wood splintered, but held. Behind her, the stairs groaned, wood beams giving way. "Again!" she shouted. "Push from your side!" Together they got it open. 6 women stumbled out, 2 carrying children. "Go!" Elara gasped. "Down the back stairs, now!" They ran. She turned to follow. The floor collapsed. Not under her, behind her. The section she'd just crossed, just gone, falling away into flame below. She was trapped. The only exit now a pit of fire. The women at the stairs had stopped, staring back at her. "Go!" she screamed. "Save yourselves!" One of them, Maggie, she realized through the smoke, shook her head, kicked off her shoes, ran back. "Give me your hand!" The gap wasn't that wide. Maybe 6 feet. Maybe survivable. "You have to jump," Maggie said. "Now, before the rest goes." Elara looked down. Flames. Just flames. If she missed, she jumped. Maggie caught her wrist, hauled her across. They both went down in a tangle of limbs and burned fabric. "Run," Maggie panted. "Both of us, run!" They ran. Down those back stairs. Through smoke so thick Elara couldn't see her own hands. Out into air that felt like ice water after drowning. They collapsed on the street. Someone threw a blanket over her. Someone else was shouting. The building behind them groaned once, long and low, then surrendered to physics and collapsed inward in a shower of sparks. Abigail appeared, face streaked with tears and soot. "You stupid, brave, impossible woman." Elara couldn't speak, just coughed. Everything hurt. "Is everyone out?" she finally managed. "Everyone who's alive. We lost 4. 2 elderly women, 2 children. 4 people. Dead." "This wasn't an accident," Abigail said quietly. "The fire started in 3 places at once. Someone set it." "Hayward. We can't prove it. But yes, this is his answer to your exposé. He's showing you what happens when you threaten him." Elara stared at the smoking ruins. At the women huddled in groups, homeless now. At the children crying. 4 people dead because she'd picked a fight with a man who saw human lives as acceptable casualties. "Your Grace," a constable approached, young, nervous. "I need to ask about how the fire started." Before she could answer, someone else spoke. She had nothing to do with it. Adrian. He stood at the edge of the crowd in his morning clothes, hatless, looking like he'd thrown on a coat and run, looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before. "Your Grace," the constable said, confused. "I wasn't suggesting—" "My wife was attempting rescue," Adrian continued, voice cold and authoritative. "I'll testify to that personally if required. She's a hero, Constable. I suggest you focus your investigation on arson rather than harassing victims." The constable backed down. Immediately. Because Adrian's voice carried the weight of centuries of aristocratic authority. He walked over, crouched beside her. Looked at her, really looked for the first time since their wedding. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Your hands are burned. You've inhaled enough smoke to damage your lungs, and you—" His voice cracked. "You could have died. 4 people did die." "I know." His hand touched her face, gentle, like she was something breakable. "And you nearly made it 5. I had to try." "I know that too." Something passed between them. Something Elara didn't have words for. Recognition, maybe. The moment when you realize you've been seeing someone wrong the entire time. "We need to get you home," Adrian said. "I can't go home. These women will be taken care of. I'm already arranging temporary housing, medical care, everything they need." "You are?" "I am." He helped her stand. "You're not the only one who can help people, Elara. You're just the only one brave enough to run into burning buildings while doing it." She let him lead her to his carriage, let him wrap her in blankets, let herself, for the first time in months, lean against someone else. Hayward did this? She said as they drove home. I know. He killed 4 people to send me a message. I know that too. Then what are we going to do about it? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, we're going to destroy him. The word landed like a promise. I thought you couldn't take sides, Elara said. Political neutrality, career suicide. That was before he tried to murder my wife. Adrian's voice was absolutely cold. Neutrality is off the table. He wants a war? He'll get one. For the first time since her marriage, Elara looked at Adrian and saw not the distant duke who'd bought her out of obligation. She saw an ally, maybe even, eventually, something more. The next 3 weeks were war. Adrian used every political connection he had. He called in favors, applied pressure, made it clear that anyone who stood with Hayward would stand against the Duke of Thornfield. Elara provided the ammunition, documents, testimonies, evidence. Adrian provided the artillery, access, influence, the kind of power that made men listen whether they wanted to or not. They worked side by side. Sometimes in his study, papers spread across every surface. Sometimes at dinner, discussing strategy between courses. Sometimes late at night, both exhausted, neither willing to stop. She learned things about him, that he'd been forced into his title at 19 when his father died, that he'd built his political career by being reliable, neutral, safe, that his first wife had been his arranged escape from loneliness, and her death had convinced him caring was the same as failing. He learned things about her, that she'd started her network because invisibility felt like dying slowly, that she hadn't planned to fall into activism, she'd stumbled into it by refusing to look away, that she was terrified most of the time, but had stopped letting fear make her decisions. Why did you run into that building? He asked one night. Because someone had to. That's not an answer. Elara thought about it. Because if I'm going to have power, your power, through this marriage, then I'd better use it for something that matters. Otherwise, I'm just another rich person playing at caring while people die. Adrian studied her. You could have died too. I know. And that didn't stop you. No. You're completely insane, he said. Probably. He laughed. Actually laughed. First time she'd heard it. I think, he said slowly, I may have married the wrong woman for entirely the right reasons. What does that mean? It means I wanted someone who wouldn't disrupt my life, and I got someone who disrupts everything. He stood, walked to where she sat, and I'm beginning to think that's what I actually needed. His hand touched her face, the same gentleness he'd shown at the fire. Adrian! The door burst open. Webb stumbled in, face flushed, papers clutched in his hand. We have him, he gasped. Hayward. The fire. We have proof. The proof was beautiful in its simplicity. Hayward had paid someone to set the fire, had paid them with a check drawn on his personal account. The arsonist, nervous about being implicated, had kept it. Insurance against betrayal. Now that arsonist, facing his own charges, had decided Hayward wasn't worth hanging for. He'll testify? Adrian asked. He'll sing like a canary if we guarantee immunity. Elara looked at the check, at Hayward's signature, at physical proof of attempted mass murder. We go public immediately, she said. We go to the police first, Adrian corrected. Properly. Through channels. This isn't just scandal anymore, it's criminal conspiracy. If we do this right, he won't just lose his reputation. He'll lose his freedom. They went to the police, then the papers, then Parliament. The response was nuclear. Hayward was arrested within 24 hours. His assets frozen. His factories placed under government oversight, pending investigation. The man who'd seemed untouchable was brought down by his own arrogance. His certainty that no one would dare challenge him enough to make him be careful. The trial was spectacular. Packed courtrooms. Testimony from workers describing conditions. Evidence of the bribes, the negligence, the calculated cruelty. And finally, the check. The arsonist's testimony, proof of murder, guilty on all counts. Hayward was sentenced to 15 years. Elara watched from the gallery as they led him away. He saw her, met her eyes, and the look on his face wasn't hatred or rage, it was disbelief. That someone like her, a woman, a duchess playing at activism, had actually beaten him. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She just watched him disappear into the system he'd thought he owned. Outside the courthouse, crowds had gathered. Workers, women from the network, people whose lives would change because one man had finally faced consequences. "Your Grace!" someone shouted. "Speech! Speech!" Elara looked at Adrian. He nodded. She stepped forward. "I'm not a hero," she said, voice carrying. "I'm just someone who refused to look away. Someone who had power and decided to use it. That's all. That's everything." Cheers erupted, but Elara barely heard them. Because standing at the edge of the crowd, half hidden in shadow, was a man she didn't recognize, watching her. Not with celebration, with calculation. He caught her noticing him, and smiled, then disappeared into the crowd. Adrian appeared at her elbow. "What is it?" "I don't know," she said quietly. "But that man, did you see him?" "What man?" "He was gone. Completely. Like he'd never been there at all." Elara felt ice slide down her spine. They'd won. Hayward was finished. Justice had been served. So why did she suddenly feel like they'd just made an even more dangerous enemy? "We should go home," Adrian said, concerned. "Yes," she agreed. But as they walked to the carriage, she couldn't shake the feeling. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The man appeared again 3 days later. Not in shadow this time. In Adrian's study, sitting in the leather chair like he owned it, fingers steepled, watching the door with the patience of a spider in its web. Elara walked in looking for Adrian and froze. "Good afternoon, Your Grace," the man said. Pleasant voice, cultured accent. Everything about him screamed wealth and education except for his eyes. Those were cold as January rivers. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." "How did you get in here?" "Your butler let me in. I told him I had an appointment with the Duke." He smiled. People rarely question men who look like they belong. Elara didn't sit. "Who are you?" "Lord William Ashford, though the title's somewhat decorative at this point. My family's fortune has seen better days." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. I promise I'm not here to harm you. Quite the opposite, actually." Something in his tone made her skin crawl. But she sat because standing felt like showing weakness. "What do you want?" "What I want," Ashford said slowly, "is to offer you an opportunity. You've made quite a name for yourself, Duchess. Taking down Charles Hayward was impressive. Brutal, effective, public. You demonstrated something very few people possess, the willingness to burn bridges to get results. That wasn't about results, that was about justice. Was it?" His smile widened. "Or was it about power? About proving that someone like you, a woman, a purchased wife, a nobody elevated by marriage, could take down a man the entire system protected?" "I think you should leave." "Not yet." Ashford leaned forward. "Because here's what you don't understand. Hayward wasn't the problem. He was a symptom. There are dozens like him. Hundreds. Men who exploit workers, abuse power, buy silence. You took down one. Congratulations." The system barely noticed. Elara's hands clenched. "Then I'll take down more." "With what? Your little network of workhouse women? Your sympathetic newspaper editors? Your husband's political connections?" He laughed. "You're fighting an entire structure built over centuries. You need more than passion and documentation. You need coordination, resources, an actual organization instead of ad hoc activism. And you're offering this why? Because I benefit from chaos." Ashford stood, walked to the window. "My family lost everything when the textile markets shifted. We backed the wrong innovations, made bad investments, and now I'm aristocracy in name only. Men like Hayward, they destroyed families like mine through ruthless business practices. So yes, I want to see them burn, and you, Duchess, seem exceptionally good at starting fires. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership. I have connections you don't, disgruntled aristocrats, minor nobles who resent the industrial magnates, politicians nursing grudges. You have the moral authority and the public platform. Together we could build something that actually threatens the system instead of just annoying it." The door opened. Adrian walked in and stopped dead. "What the hell are you doing in my study?" "Ah, Your Grace." Ashford turned, unfazed. "I was just explaining to your remarkable wife how we might expand her excellent work into something more systematic." Adrian looked at Elara. "You know this man?" "We just met. He broke into our house to make me a job offer." "I wouldn't call it breaking in. Your butler." "Get out." Adrian said flatly. Now, before I have you arrested for trespassing. Ashford smiled, reached into his coat. Adrian tensed and pulled out a card, set it on the desk. Think about it, Your Grace. Both of you. You've won a battle. But the war, that requires allies you probably don't want but definitely need. He walked out. The moment the door closed, Adrian locked it, then turned to Elara. Tell me you're not considering whatever he just proposed. I'm considering everything. Elara, that man is dangerous. Ashford's family didn't lose their fortune through bad luck. His father was investigated for fraud and barely avoided prosecution. William himself has a reputation for manipulation, and he's right. She picked up the card. Plain paper, neat handwriting, an address in Belgravia. We took down Hayward. Great. What about the other factory owners paying starvation wages? What about the landlords extorting tenants? What about the magistrates taking bribes? We can't fight them all one at a time. So you partner with someone worse? We partner with someone useful. Adrian stared at her. When did you become this? This what? Willing to compromise with people like Ashford. Willing to use his tactics. You spent months building your network on trust and mutual aid. Now you're considering an alliance with a man who views people as tools. Elara set the card down. Do you know what I learned fighting Hayward? That being right isn't enough. That documentation isn't enough. That even justice isn't enough if you can't enforce it. We won because you used your power, your connections, your willingness to make people afraid of opposing you. How is that different from what Ashford's offering? Because my methods have limits. Ashford has none. Maybe that's exactly what we need. The silence stretched. I'm trying to protect you, Adrian said quietly, from making choices you can't undo, from becoming the thing you're fighting against. I know. She touched his face, surprising herself, surprising him. But I didn't ask for protection. I asked for partnership. Are you with me or not? I'm always with you, even when I think you're wrong. Then trust me to know the difference between using someone and becoming them. She kissed him, quick, decisive, then picked up Ashford's card and left. Behind her, Adrian stood alone in his study, looking like a man watching something precious walk toward a cliff edge, hoping she'd turn back, knowing she wouldn't. The address led to a townhouse smaller than Adrian's but expensively maintained. Ashford answered the door himself. No servants, she noticed. Interesting. You came, he said. Good. I gambled you were smart enough to see past your husband's protective instincts. Adrian's concerns are valid. Of course they are. I'm absolutely untrustworthy. Ashford stepped aside. But I'm also effective. Come in. Meet the others. Others. The parlor contained 5 people, 2 men, 3 women, all well-dressed, all watching her with expressions between curiosity and calculation. Introductions, Ashford said. Lord Thomas Pemberton. His family's shipping business was undercut by Hayward's railway contracts. Lady Catherine Morrison. Her husband died in a factory accident, and the owner bribed the coroner. Mr. James Fletcher, journalist blacklisted for exposing political corruption. Miss Sarah Brennan, former governess dismissed without references after refusing an employer's advances. And Mrs. Dorothy Hughes, widow whose husband's invention was stolen by a business partner with better lawyers. Each story a variation on the same theme, people damaged by a system that protected power over people. We've been watching you, Lady Morrison said. Her voice was surprisingly steady for someone discussing her husband's death. What you did to Hayward was exactly what we've been trying to do individually for years. You succeeded because you had resources and ruthlessness. We want to replicate that. By doing what? Elara asked. By creating an organization, Ashford said. Not a charity, not a reform committee, an actual coordinated effort to identify, document, and destroy people who abuse power. We pool resources, share information, strike strategically instead of randomly. Fletcher, the journalist, leaned forward. I have access to printing presses and distribution networks. Dorothy has connections in patent law. Sarah knows which families mistreat servants and which can be pressured to reform. Thomas can disrupt shipping routes. Catherine, he glanced at her. Catherine has money and absolutely nothing left to lose. And you, Lord Ashford? Elara asked. What do you bring besides connections? I bring the willingness to do what needs doing without moral hand-wringing. You want to pressure a factory owner. I know where his mistress lives and which creditors he's avoiding. You want to influence a magistrate? I know what he drinks, where he drinks it, and who he's afraid of. You want someone publicly humiliated? He smiled. I'm exceptional at finding secrets people would kill to keep hidden. That's blackmail. That's leverage. And yes, it's unpleasant, but you didn't bring down Hayward by playing fair. You broke into his office and stole documents. Then you ruined him publicly. How is what I'm suggesting different? It wasn't. Not really. That's what scared her. I need to think about this, Elara said. Think quickly, Ashford replied. Because while you're deliberating, the system is rebuilding. Hayward's factories are already being bought up by other owners. His business partners are distancing themselves publicly while maintaining the same practices privately. You won one case. They're learning from it. By next year, they'll have found ways to protect themselves from your methods. He was right. She hated that he was right. I'll be in touch, she said. As she left, Dorothy Hughes followed her out. Your Grace, a moment? They stood on the steps, cold November air, London noise surrounding them. You're wondering if we're the good people, Dorothy said. If this alliance is worth the moral cost. I wondered that too. Then I remembered my husband showing me his invention, a safer steam valve that would save lives. I remembered him being laughed out of offices by men who said he was nobody. I remembered finding him dead because his partner stole his work and left us with nothing. And I stopped wondering whether fighting dirty was worth it. Her eyes were dry, hard. The system killed my husband as surely as if someone put a gun to his head. So yes, I'll work with Ashford. I'll use blackmail and pressure and any other tool available, because playing by rules they wrote means losing every time. She walked back inside. Elara stood alone, feeling the weight of choice pressing down. Adrian would tell her to walk away, that there were other paths, better paths. But Adrian had power from birth. He'd never had to claw his way up from nothing, never had to choose between morality and survival. She went home, found Adrian in his study, working through correspondence. He looked up when she entered. Well? I met them, Ashford and 5 others, all people damaged by the system, all wanting revenge dressed up as reform. And they're right about everything I hate to admit. We can't fight case by case. We need coordination, organization, and they're offering exactly that. Adrian set down his pen. At what cost? Probably my soul, if we're being dramatic about it. I'm not being dramatic, I'm being realistic. Elara, I've watched men like Ashford operate. They start with justified anger and end with becoming the thing they fought. If you tie yourself to him, I tie myself to resources we need. She sat across from him. Adrian, answer honestly. Do you think we can change the system by playing within its rules? I think we have to try. Why? Because that's the moral high ground? Because that's what good people do? She leaned forward. Good people are losing. Good people are dying in factory fires while the owners vacation in Bath. Good people are following rules written by bad people to keep good people powerless. So you become bad people with better publicity. The question hit hard because it was exactly what she feared. I don't know, she admitted, but I know doing nothing means watching everything we fought for get slowly undone, and I can't do that. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. If you do this, he said finally, I'm with you. But I'm also going to be the voice telling you when you've gone too far, when the methods start mattering more than the goals. Someone has to hold that line. Let it be me. Even if I hate you for it, especially then. She wanted to argue, to say she didn't need a moral compass, didn't need checking, but she did. She absolutely did. All right, she said. I'll work with Ashford, but you're my veto vote. If you say something's too far, we don't do it. You'll actually listen to me? I'll try. That's the best I can offer. He laughed, tired. Then I guess we're doing this. We're doing this. They shook hands like business partners sealing a contract. Then Adrian pulled her close and kissed her like something more. The next morning, Elara sent word to Ashford. She was in. The organization, they needed a name. Ashford suggested the Reform League, which Elara vetoed as too pompous. Started meeting weekly. They operated from Catherine Morrison's townhouse in Bloomsbury. Discreet location. No servants who might talk. The structure was simple. Each member brought intelligence about specific targets. They discussed strategy collectively, then executed individually using their particular skills. First target, Lord Edmund Cartwright, magistrate. Notorious for dismissing assault charges against wealthy defendants while throwing poor offenders in debt houses. Fletcher had documented 23 cases where clear evidence was ignored because the accused had money or connections. "We need to destroy his credibility," Ashford said at their second meeting. "Make him radioactive, force his resignation." "How?" Sarah asked. "By proving he takes bribes. We know he does. Every magistrate in London does. We just need evidence." "Which means," Elara asked, though she already knew, "which means someone gets close to him, offers a bribe, documents the acceptance." Everyone looked at Elara. "He won't take money from a duchess," she said. "Too visible." "No," Ashford agreed, "but he might take it from someone appearing to be a concerned brother trying to protect his sister from assault charges. Someone aristocratic enough to be credible, but minor enough to seem desperate." Thomas Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. "You want me to play that role?" "You're perfect for it. Minor title. Recent financial troubles everyone knows about. You show up at Cartwright's club, have a few drinks, mention your sister's unfortunate situation, and see if he bites. And if he does, we document everything. Then we leak it." Thomas looked at Elara. "You're comfortable with this?" Was she? "Do we have other options?" she asked. "We could file formal complaints," Catherine said. "Go through proper channels," which Cartwright will ignore because he is the proper channels. "We could stage a protest," which accomplishes nothing except making us feel virtuous. The room went quiet. "I'll do it," Thomas said finally. "But if this goes wrong, if I'm caught—" "You won't be," Ashford said. "I've already established the story. You have gambling debts. Your sister, fictional, before anyone panics, got into an altercation at a society party. You're desperate to avoid scandal. It's entirely believable." "When?" Thomas asked. "Tomorrow night. Cartwright's always at his club on Thursdays. 3 drinks in, he's talkative. 6 drinks in, he's negotiable." They spent the next hour planning, establishing the story, preparing documentation. Fletcher would have a reporter nearby to verify timestamps. Dorothy would handle the legal framework for making the evidence admissible. Elara just listened, watched how easily they slipped into criminal conspiracy, how easily she accepted it. "Your Grace," Ashford said, "you're quiet. I'm thinking." "About?" "About how normal this feels. We're planning to frame a magistrate for a crime he'd absolutely commit if given the chance. And it feels justified." "Because it is justified," Catherine said firmly. "Cartwright has destroyed lives, taken bribes, enabled violence. He deserves whatever happens to him." "But we're becoming his judges and executioners without trial." "He is the trial," Fletcher snapped. "He's the system. You can't use the system to fight itself." Sarah touched Elara's hand. "Your Grace, I understand your hesitation, but I've testified in front of Cartwright. I watched him dismiss evidence of my assault because the man who attacked me had money. I watched him threaten me with prosecution for wasting the court's time. If we don't do this, he continues destroying lives with legal authority. Is that better?" No, it wasn't better. But it wasn't exactly right either. "We do this," Elara said slowly, "but we do it with conditions. We only target people who've actually committed crimes. We don't manufacture evidence. We document what's real. And we try legitimate channels first. This is the last resort, not the first option." Ashford smiled. "Acceptable, though you'll find the last resort comes up quite often." He wasn't wrong. Thomas executed the plan perfectly, got Cartwright drinking, mentioned his fictional sister's situation, offered £500 for the case to disappear. Cartwright took it. Fletcher's reporter verified the handoff. Dorothy had a barrister witness the documentation. Within 48 hours, the story was public. Magistrate Cartwright accepts bribe. Resignation demanded. The response was immediate. Parliament launched an investigation. Cartwright resigned within the week to avoid formal prosecution. A replacement magistrate, younger, with a reputation for actually following law, was appointed. "One down," Ashford said at their next meeting. "Who's next?" They had a list: factory owners, landlords, politicians with voting records that betrayed workers while protecting wealth. The organization worked methodically. Some targets they pressured privately, some they exposed publicly, some they simply made it too expensive to continue their practices. Elara's role evolved. She wasn't just participating, she was becoming the face of the movement, the duchess who fought for justice, the woman who couldn't be dismissed as just another angry radical because she had title, wealth, and growing public support. Newspapers started covering her work regularly. At social events, women approached her with information. Workers sent letters documenting abuses. Her network expanded from workhouses to factories to households across London, and Adrian watched it all with growing concern. "You're getting famous," he said one evening. "That's dangerous." "Famous helps. It means they can't make me disappear." "It also means they know exactly where to find you." "Good. Let them come." "That's not bravado. That's exhaustion talking." He touched her face. "When's the last time you slept properly? Ate a full meal? Did anything besides work?" "When's the last time you did anything besides worry about me? That's my job now, apparently. Someone has to." She wanted to snap at him, to say she didn't need protecting, but she was tired, bone-deep tired. Fighting every day took a toll even when you were winning. "I'm fine," she said instead. "You're not fine. You're burning yourself out and calling it dedication. Would you prefer I stop?" "I'd prefer you sleep, occasionally, as a radical concept." She laughed despite herself. "You've gotten bossy. I've gotten scared. There's a difference." He pulled her close. "I'm watching you fight this war, and I'm terrified you'll win it, but lose yourself in the process." "I won't. Promise me. Promise you'll tell me if it gets to be too much, if Ashford pushes too far, if you need to stop." She wanted to promise, but she wasn't sure she could keep it. "I promised to try," she said. It wasn't enough. They both knew it, but it was all she had. The 6th month of the organization's operation brought their biggest target yet, Lord Chancellor Morrison. No relation to Catherine, unfortunate coincidence. He was drafting legislation that would roll back factory safety regulations, citing economic concerns. Regulations that had been won through years of worker advocacy and dozens of deaths. "He's planning to announce it next week," Fletcher said, spreading documents across Catherine's parlor table. "Complete deregulation. Factory owners could set their own safety standards, which means no safety standards." "Why?" Elara demanded. "What does he gain?" "Contributions from industrial interests for his next campaign. He's up for re-election in 6 months. Needs funding. So he's selling worker safety for political money." "Welcome to Parliament," Adrian said dryly. He'd started attending their meetings, officially to monitor, unofficially because he'd become as invested as anyone. "Can we stop him?" Sarah asked. "Not through legislation," Adrian said. "He has the votes. I've tried counting. We're short." "Then we stop him another way," Ashford said. "We find what he's hiding and we use it." "Everyone's hiding something," Dorothy added, "especially politicians." "The question," Ashford continued, "is whether we're willing to cross that line. Investigating factory owners is one thing. Going after a Lord Chancellor, that's declaring war on Parliament itself." Everyone looked at Elara. She'd become the deciding vote somehow, the moral center that kept them from sliding completely into vendetta. "What's he hiding?" she asked Fletcher. "I don't know yet, but I have sources. Give me 3 days." 3 days, Elara agreed. "Then we decide." Fletcher found it in 2. Lord Chancellor Morrison had a mistress, 23 years old, former actress. He'd set her up in a flat in Kensington and visited twice weekly. "That's not unusual," Catherine said. "Half of Parliament has mistresses." "Ah," Fletcher said. "But Morrison's built his career on moral reform, religious values, traditional marriage. He's sponsored 4 bills in the last 2 years about protecting the sanctity of family. He's a hypocrite, and his voting base will crucify him for it." "We're going to expose his affair?" Thomas asked. "We're going to make him choose," Ashford corrected. "Withdraw the deregulation bill, or his constituents learn what their moral champion does on Tuesday and Thursday nights." Elara felt sick. "That's blackmail," she said. "Yes. It's also effective. It's also destroying a woman's life for something she didn't do. That actress has nothing to do with factory regulations." So we find another way, Adrian said quietly. Ashford laughed. What other way? Ask him nicely? Petition? You've tried that. We've all tried that. It doesn't work. So yes, we use the affair. We use whatever works. No, Elara said. Excuse me? I said no. We're not ruining an innocent woman's life. Find something else. There isn't anything else. This is what we have. Then we don't have enough. Ashford stood. With all respect, Your Grace, you don't get to play moral authority when convenient. We're already crossing lines, already using methods you condemned 6 months ago. Now you want to draw a line here? Why? Because it's a woman? Because it makes you uncomfortable? Because it's wrong. So is letting factory owners kill workers to save money. Pick your wrong, Duchess. The room went silent. She's right, Catherine said finally. I hate it, but she's right. We use the affair. We're no better than Morrison. We're just trading one kind of exploitation for another. Then what do you suggest? Ashford demanded. We find his money, Adrian said. The contributions he's receiving. If he's taking payments to sponsor this bill, that's corruption. We expose the money, not the mistress. That'll take weeks to trace. Then we take weeks, Elara said. Or we vote now. Who's willing to use the affair? Ashford raised his hand. So did Thomas, reluctantly. Fletcher, Dorothy, Sarah, Catherine, and Adrian didn't. Motion fails, Elara said. We find the money. Ashford stared at her. You're making a mistake. By the time we trace funding, the bill will have passed. Then we'll fight the bill after it passes, but we do it without destroying someone who never asked to be part of this. You're weak, Ashford said flatly. You're choosing feeling righteous over getting results. Maybe. Or maybe I'm choosing the kind of victory I can live with. He walked out. The others sat in uncomfortable silence. He'll come back, Fletcher said finally. He needs us as much as we need him. Maybe, Elara said, but if this organization requires me to become someone I hate, I don't want it. She left before anyone could respond. Adrian found her outside, sitting on Catherine's steps, shaking. You did the right thing, he said. Did I? Or did I just let people die because I wanted to feel good about myself? You held a line. That matters. Does it? Will it matter to the workers who get hurt because we couldn't stop Morrison? Adrian sat beside her. I don't know. But I know if you'd crossed that line, you'd never come back from it. I watched you nearly die in a burning building trying to save people. I watched you build a network from nothing. I watched you take down Hayward. You're not weak, Elara. You're the strongest person I know. Don't let Ashford convince you otherwise. She leaned against him. What if strong isn't enough? Then we find another way to win. They found it 3 days later. Not the money. That investigation was ongoing. Something better. Morrison's son, 20 years old, arrested 2 months prior for public drunkenness and assault. The charges had disappeared. Paid off or buried, probably both. Different kind of leverage, Fletcher explained. We don't threaten to expose it. We just let people know it exists. Quietly. Through the right channels. His moral reform platform becomes harder to maintain when his own son is a public menace he protected from consequences. That's not blackmail, Dorothy said slowly. That's just truth. It's truth weaponized, Elara corrected. But it's truth, and it doesn't hurt anyone except Morrison, who deserves it. They released the information strategically. Anonymous tips to newspapers. Questions raised in Parliament by Adrian's allies. Public records suddenly discovered and discussed. Within a week, Morrison was facing questions about family values and special treatment. His moral authority crumbled. The deregulation bill lost support as his credibility vanished. It died in committee. The celebration at Catherine's townhouse was subdued. They'd won. But it had been close, and Ashford hadn't returned. He'll be back, Thomas said. He just needs time to sulk. Or, Adrian said quietly, he's forming his own organization, one without moral constraints. The thought chilled everyone. If he does? Catherine asked. Then we deal with it, Elara said. But for now we celebrate what we've actually accomplished. We stopped deregulation. We protected workers. We did it without destroying innocence. That's worth something. They drank to that. Later, as the party wound down, Adrian pulled Elara aside. I'm proud of you, he said, for holding that line. Are you? Or are you just relieved I didn't become someone you'd have to oppose? Both. Is that allowed? She kissed him. It's allowed. Good. Because I've been meaning to tell you something. What? I love you. The words hung in the air. They'd been married almost a year, had fought together, nearly died together, built something that looked like partnership and felt like more. But he'd never said it. You don't have to say it back, Adrian continued quickly. I know this started as obligation. I know I was terrible to you. I needed you to know. You've changed everything. I'm not the person I was before you. I don't want to be that person again. Elara stared at him. At this man who'd bought her like property and somehow become the person she trusted most in the world. I love you too, she said, and meant it. They went home together. For the first time, it felt like home instead of a prison, like a place they'd built together instead of a cage one of them owned. In bed afterwards, Adrian said, "What's next?" Next? With the organization, with the work. What's next? Elara thought about it. About Hayward in prison, Morrison's bill defeated, Cartwright removed from office, a dozen smaller victories scattered across the year. I want to expand, she said. Not just London, not just famous cases. I want a real system, places women can go for help, legal services, job placement, housing, not charity, infrastructure, something that lasts. That's ambitious. I'm an ambitious person. You married me. Your fault. He laughed. Fair. And you'll need help. Funding. Political support. Are you offering? I'm offering everything, Adrian said. My wealth, my connections, my name, whatever you need. Let's build something that outlasts us. She kissed him. Deal. The next morning brought a letter, delivered by anonymous messenger, no return address. Inside, one sentence in elegant script. Well played, Duchess. But the game's not over. Elara showed it to Adrian. Ashford, he said. Probably. Or someone new, someone worse. Does it scare you? Terrifies me, but I'm doing it anyway. She burned the letter, watched it turn to ash. Let them come. All of them. The Ashfords and Haywards and Morrisons, the entire system that thought it could silence her. She'd stopped disappearing. Now she was going to make sure no one else did either. The man appeared again 3 days later. Not hiding this time. Walking straight up to the townhouse in broad daylight, handing the butler a card with the casual confidence of someone who knew he'd be received. Elara read the name twice. Lord Edmund Carver, Secretary to the Prime Minister. He's waiting in the drawing room, the butler said, nervous. Said it was urgent government business. Adrian was in Parliament. Elara was alone. Perfect. She found Carver by the window, examining Adrian's collection of crystal decanters, like he was pricing them for auction. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of bland, forgettable face that let men move through power circles without leaving impressions. Your Grace. He turned, smile not reaching his eyes. Thank you for seeing me. I don't recall agreeing to see you. No, but you're curious. That's why you came down instead of having me thrown out. He gestured to chairs. Shall we be civilized about this? Elara stayed standing. About what exactly? About the problem you've created. Carver settled into a chair uninvited. Charles Hayward's conviction has caused complications. He had arrangements with several members of Parliament, financial arrangements. Now those arrangements are being investigated. Men are nervous. When men in power get nervous, they make decisions. Good. They should be nervous. Should they? Carver's smile sharpened. Tell me, Your Grace, what did you think would happen after Hayward fell? Did you imagine the system would simply thank you for exposing corruption and reform itself? I imagined men would stop killing workers for profit. How wonderfully naive. He stood, moved closer. Let me explain how this actually works. Hayward wasn't an aberration. He was standard practice. Every factory owner in England runs operations the same way. Minimum safety, maximum output, profit over everything. You didn't expose one bad man. You threatened an entire economic model. Then the model needs to change. Perhaps, but not because a duchess playing reformer demands it. Carver's voice dropped. You've made enemies, Your Grace, powerful ones. They've asked me to deliver a message. which is stop, immediately, dismantle your network, withdraw from public life, play the proper aristocrat, or face consequences. Elara laughed. She couldn't help it. You're threatening me? After everything that's happened, you think threats will work? Not threats. Facts. Carver pulled a folder from his coat. We know about the break-in at Hayward's office. We have testimony from the night watchman. You committed burglary, Your Grace, a felony. One word from me and you'll be arrested. Do it. I'd love to see you explain why it took months to press charges. We also know about your husband's involvement, his use of political influence to target specific businessmen, his financial backing of legal cases against factory owners. Carver opened the folder. Corruption, Your Grace. Abuse of position, enough to end his career and potentially land him in prison. The words hit like bullets. You're lying. I'm really not. Every favor he called in, every pressure he applied, every vote he made after you started your crusade, we've documented it all. The law doesn't care about noble intentions. It cares about abuse of power. Carver closed the folder. So here's how this ends. You stop. You disappear back into drawing rooms and charity teas. Or we destroy him. Your choice. Elara's hands clenched. You can't. We already have. The charges are drafted. We're simply waiting for the word to file them. He moved toward the door, then paused. You have 1 week. After that, the Duke of Thornfield becomes another cautionary tale about what happens when aristocrats forget their place. He left. Elara stood frozen, mind racing. They couldn't prosecute Adrian for helping her. Could they? Abuse of power was such a vague charge, used selectively, used when powerful men wanted someone gone. They'd do it. She knew they'd do it. The front door opened. Adrian's voice. Elara, are you home? She met him in the entrance hall, saw his face light up, something that happened now, something that still caught her off guard. You won't believe the session today, he started. We got preliminary approval for the factory oversight bill. Your documentation made the difference. 3 committee members who were holdouts completely reversed after. Adrian, she cut him off. We need to talk. His smile faded. What happened? She told him. Everything. Carver's visit, the threats, the file documenting Adrian's involvement. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So they're coming after me, he said finally. Because of me. Because I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this. And now you'll lose everything because of that choice. Adrian moved to the window, stared out at the street. Do you remember what I said after the fire? That I'd spent my whole career being neutral, reliable, safe? Yes, I hated it. The admission came out raw. Every day. Watching injustice happen and telling myself staying silent was strategic. Telling myself I could do more good by preserving my position than by risking it. He turned to face her. You know what I actually did? Nothing. I did nothing that mattered, nothing that changed anything, nothing worth remembering. That's not true. It is true. And then you happened. You with your impossible crusade and your refusal to accept that some things can't be changed. You made me realize I'd been using my position as an excuse to avoid having principles. He crossed to her, took her hands. These past months, working with you, fighting beside you, that's the first time I felt like my life had purpose, like I was something more than a title walking around in expensive clothes. Adrian, so if they want to prosecute me, let them. If they want to destroy my career, let them try. I'd rather lose everything fighting for something real than spend the rest of my life as a coward with a seat in Parliament. Elara felt tears burning. That's very noble, also very stupid. I learned from the best. She wanted to laugh, wanted to cry, wanted to kiss him and shake him and demand he choose self-preservation over principle. But she'd spent 6 years married to this man without really knowing him. Now, finally, she understood. He wasn't the cold, distant duke she'd thought. He was someone who'd been so afraid of caring that he'd built walls between himself and everything that mattered, until she'd crashed through them by refusing to stop caring no matter how much it cost. We're not giving up, she said. Either of us. Agreed, but we need a strategy better than martyrdom. I might have one. The idea was forming, dangerous, possibly insane, but you're going to hate it. Tell me anyway. The strategy was simple. Make everything public. If Carver and his allies wanted to prosecute Adrian, let them try, in full view of everyone. Make it so visible, so obviously political, that the prosecution itself became the scandal. We call a press conference, Elara said. Announce what they're threatening. Release every document showing how you used your position and why. Make the public choose between protecting workers and protecting the system that exploits them. That's political suicide, Adrian said. It's transparency. Let people decide if you committed crimes or did the right thing in the only way possible. And if they decide I'm guilty, then we lose. But at least we lose fighting. Marcus Webb loved it. It's brilliant, insane, but brilliant. You turn the trial into a referendum on the entire system. Even if they convict him, they'll have to do it while the whole country watches them protect factory owners over workers. There's risk, Adrian warned. Real risk. I could actually go to prison. I know. Elara met his eyes. But what's the alternative? I disappear. You become the man you were before. And everyone we've helped, everyone counting on us to keep fighting, loses everything. Adrian looked at Webb. Can you handle the legal defense if it goes to trial? Can I handle defending a duke who committed crimes in service of justice against a government trying to protect industrial profiteers? Webb grinned. Your Grace, I was born for this case. Then let's do it. All right. The press conference happened 2 days later. They held it at the townhouse, neutral ground, but home territory. Every major newspaper in London sent reporters. Word had spread that the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield had something explosive to announce. Elara stood beside Adrian, facing a room packed with journalists, artists sketching for illustrated papers, even a few members of Parliament who'd come to witness the spectacle. Adrian spoke first. Over the past 6 months, I have used my position as Duke and Member of Parliament to assist my wife in investigating and exposing industrial corruption. I have applied political pressure to factory owners. I have financed legal cases against men accused of worker exploitation. I have used every tool available to me, including some that exist in legal gray areas, to pursue justice for people who had no other advocates. Murmurs swept the room. Pencils flew across notebooks. I am now informed, Adrian continued, that certain government officials consider these actions criminal. They have compiled evidence of alleged abuse of power. They have threatened prosecution unless my wife ceases her reform work and I return to political neutrality. The murmurs became shouts, questions overlapping. Who's threatening you? What specific charges? Is this confirmed? Adrian raised a hand. I'm not here to name individuals. I'm here to present a question to the British public. Is it a crime to use power in defense of the powerless? Is it corruption to pressure factory owners who knowingly endanger lives? Is it abuse of position to demand the law apply equally to rich and poor? He paused. Let the questions hang. If the answer is yes, if those actions are crimes, then I am guilty. I will accept prosecution. I will face trial. But I will not apologize for refusing to stand idle while people died. Elara stepped forward. My husband speaks of the law, she said. Let me speak of the reality behind it. 3 months ago, a workhouse burned, 4 people died. That fire was set by order of Charles Hayward, a man who saw murder as acceptable response to exposure. The system he represented, the practices he defended, those continue. In every factory, every mine, every workplace where profit matters more than life. She pulled documents from her folder, held them up. These are injury reports from textile mills currently operating in London. 23 workers maimed last month alone. Most by preventable accidents, most in factories owned by men who sit in Parliament or dine with government officials. She let that sink in. We are told prosecution of my husband is necessary to preserve faith in government. I say faith in government means nothing if the government protects killers and prosecutes their accusers. So yes, charge him, put him on trial, and let a jury of ordinary citizens decide if helping workers is a crime or the only moral choice. The room erupted. Questions shouted from every direction. Demands for details. Accusations and defenses flying. Adrian took Elara's hand, squeezed once. They'd done it. Made the private threat public. Turned defense into offense. Now they'd see if the gamble paid off. The response was immediate and split. Conservative papers denounced them as radicals destroying social order. The Duke of Thornfield has forgotten his place. His wife has corrupted him beyond recognition. Prosecution is necessary to restore proper hierarchy. Working-class papers celebrated them as heroes. Finally, aristocrats willing to fight for us instead of against us. If defending workers is a crime, then the law itself is criminal. The public divided along predictable lines. Working people saw champions. Factory owners saw threats. Politicians scrambled to position themselves on whichever side seemed most politically advantageous, and Carver's allies found themselves trapped. "They can't prosecute now," Webb explained, reading through legal briefs in Adrian's study. "Not without looking like exactly what you accuse them of, government protecting industrial interests over worker safety. The optics are poison." "So we won?" Elara asked. "You survived. Winning comes next." Because momentum was building. The press conference had sparked something. Workers across London started organizing, not just demanding better conditions, demanding systematic reform, factory inspections, safety regulations with teeth, legal protections for whistleblowers. And they weren't asking nicely anymore. 3 major factories faced strikes within a week. Workers walked off citing unsafe conditions and citing Elara's documentation as proof their concerns were valid. When owners tried to fire the organizers, other workers struck in solidarity. "This is spiraling," Adrian said, reading reports of the strikes. "Factory owners are calling it revolution." "It's not revolution," Elara replied. "It's people demanding not to die at work. That's baseline humanity, not radical politics. Tell that to the men losing profits." The backlash intensified. Factory owners formed a coalition, started their own press campaign. "The Duchess of Thornfield is inciting mob violence. Her husband has betrayed his class. They must be stopped before chaos consumes England." "They're going to try something," Webb warned. "Legal prosecution is off the table. But powerful men don't just accept defeat, they adapt." He was right. The attack came at a charity gala. Elara attended because refusal would look like hiding. The event was for hospital funding, respectable, necessary, the kind of function she'd attended dozens of times before. She wore blue silk, diamonds, armor disguised as fashion. Adrian stayed close. They'd both felt it, the tension in the air, the way certain people looked at them, like they were foreign objects that needed removing. Lady Rothschild cornered them by the champagne fountain. "Duchess," she said, smile like cut glass, "how brave of you to show your face. Though I suppose you've never minded being the center of scandal?" "I don't mind being the center of truth," Elara replied evenly. "Truth?" Lady Rothschild laughed. "Is that what you call encouraging servants to rise against their betters, inciting workers to destroy the very businesses that employ them?" "I call it exposing the men who profit from exploitation." "You call it whatever helps you sleep at night." Lady Rothschild leaned closer. "But here's a truth for you, dear. You're not a hero. You're an embarrassment, a woman who forgot her place and dragged her husband down with her. And when this is over, when the strikes collapse and the workers crawl back to their factories, you'll be remembered as nothing but a cautionary tale." The words were designed to wound. They bounced off. "I'd rather be a cautionary tale than a coward," Elara said quietly. "At least people will remember I tried." She walked away before Lady Rothschild could respond, found herself on the terrace. Cool air. City lights spreading out below. "That was well handled." A woman's voice. Elara turned. She recognized her vaguely. Lady Margaret Ashford, widow of an earl, known for sharp wit and sharper investments. "Was it?" Elara asked. "Felt like barely controlled rage." "Rage is useful, properly directed." Lady Ashford moved to the railing. "I've been watching you, Duchess. Your work, your network, your utter refusal to behave as expected. And I want in." Elara blinked. "Excuse me?" "I have money, lots of it. My late husband was an industrial genius, the kind who actually cared about innovation over exploitation. He died last year, left me everything. I've been looking for something worth investing in." She smiled. "You're worth investing in. You want to fund worker advocacy?" "I want to fund systematic change. Your network is brilliant, but small. It needs capital to scale. I can provide that capital." "Why?" "Because I'm bored. Because I'm rich. Because watching you take on the entire establishment is the most interesting thing that's happened in years." Lady Ashford's expression turned serious. "And because my husband died in a factory accident that was entirely preventable. He was inspecting one of his own facilities, equipment failure that had been reported 3 times. Never fixed. He bled out before help arrived. Her voice stayed steady, but her hands gripped the railing tight. So yes, I want to help. I want every factory owner who cuts corners to face consequences. I want the men who prioritize profit over safety to lose everything. She looked at Elara. Can you use me? Can I? Elara laughed. Lady Ashford, I can absolutely use you. Margaret, we're conspirators now. Use my name. They shook hands, sealed a partnership that would reshape everything. With Margaret's money and connections, Elara's network exploded. What had been small-scale assistance became systematic infrastructure. They opened proper offices, hired full-time staff, created a legal defense fund large enough to take on major corporations. They started a newspaper, The Worker's Voice, specifically to document conditions and hold owners accountable. When traditional papers refused to run certain stories, they printed them anyway and distributed free copies at factory gates. They created a job placement system that helped workers leave dangerous facilities for safer ones. When owners tried to blacklist organizers, they helped those workers start cooperatives instead. And they trained women, not just in documentation and organization, in everything: basic literacy, legal knowledge, how to speak in public, how to organize effectively. You're building an army, Webb observed, watching women fill the office for a training session. I'm building a movement, Elara corrected. Armies need generals. Movements need everyone willing to fight. The system fought back. Of course it did. Factory owners tried to infiltrate the network with spies. They discovered them quickly. Women who'd suffered exploitation knew what authentic solidarity looked like. Police raided the office on trumped-up charges, found nothing illegal and had to return everything they'd seized, but damaged property in the process. Newspapers ran smear campaigns, called Elara a radical, an anarchist, a danger to social stability. How do you handle it? Margaret asked one day, reading a particularly vicious editorial. The constant attacks, the lies. I remember what we're fighting for, Elara said simply. They can call me anything they want. Doesn't change the truth of what we're exposing. Adrian handled the political front. He'd stopped pretending to be neutral. Instead, he became the voice in Parliament demanding accountability. Every factory death, he stood up and read the name. Every violation, he filed formal complaints. Every committee meeting, he showed up with documentation and demanded answers. The Duke of Thornfield has become intolerable, one of his colleagues complained publicly. He's transformed from respected statesman to radical agitator. Good, Adrian replied in the next session. Perhaps if more of us were intolerable, fewer workers would die. The newspapers quoted him. Working-class papers celebrated. Conservative papers condemned, but people were listening. What? The breakthrough came 8 months after the press conference. Parliament passed the Factory Safety and Oversight Act. Mandatory inspections, enforceable penalties, workers' right to report violations without retaliation. Everything Elara and Adrian had been fighting for. It wasn't perfect. Compromises had been made. Loopholes existed. But it was real change. Legal, systematic, enforceable change. We did it, Adrian said, reading the final text. They actually passed it. You did it, Elara corrected. I just provided ammunition. You fought the political war. No. He looked at her. We did it, together. The first victory begat others. Other reformers, emboldened, started similar fights. Worker protections, housing standards, education access. Each battle using the template Elara had created. Document everything. Expose corruption, make the truth impossible to ignore. The network became a model. Other cities started their own chapters. Other women reached out asking how to organize. Within a year, chapters existed in Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, Edinburgh. You've started something that's going to outlive you, Margaret said, reviewing expansion plans. You know that, right? That's the point, Elara replied. I don't want this dependent on me. I want it self-sustaining. Buzz. 2 years after their marriage, Elara and Adrian stood in the drawing room that had once felt like a prison. It looked different now, warmer, lived in. Maps on the walls showing network locations, stacks of documents awaiting review, evidence of purpose filling spaces that had been empty. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked. Everything that's happened. Everything we've lost. Elara considered. They'd lost social standing, lost political allies, lost the comfortable fiction that aristocracy came without obligation. No, she said. Do you? Not even slightly. He moved closer. Though I do regret how I treated you at the beginning, the coldness, the distance, making you feel like you were nothing but a clause in a contract. You didn't know any better. That's not an excuse. No, she agreed. But it's context. You were protecting yourself. I understand that now. Still, he took her hands. I'm sorry. For every day I made you feel invisible. For every moment I chose indifference over seeing you. Elara felt her throat tighten. And I'm sorry for judging you without understanding what you'd been through. For assuming the worst instead of seeing you were just scared, terrified, he corrected, of losing someone again, of caring and watching them die. Easier to keep everyone at distance than risk that pain. And now? Now I'm still terrified, he smiled, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. She kissed him, finally, properly. Not the perfunctory wedding kiss or stolen moments in crisis, but real intimacy earned through 2 years of fighting side by side. I love you, she said, in case that wasn't obvious. It was becoming clear. He pulled her closer. I love you too. Stubbornness, crusading instinct, complete inability to choose safety, all of it. What? 5 years after Hayward's conviction, Elara stood before Parliament. Not in the gallery, on the floor. It had taken an act of Parliament to allow it. Women didn't address the House. But Adrian had spent a year pushing for the exception, for this specific case, for this specific woman. The chamber was packed, every seat filled, gallery overflowing. This was unprecedented. Historical. Members of Parliament, Elara began, her voice steady despite the audience, despite the weight of the moment. I stand before you not as the Duchess of Thornfield, not as my husband's wife, but as the representative of thousands of women whose voices you have never heard. She spoke for 40 minutes, detailed the network's work, the lives saved, the changes implemented. The systematic documentation proving worker protections weren't charity, they were necessity. She presented numbers, data, evidence too comprehensive to dismiss, and she made a demand. The Factory Safety Act was a beginning, but we need more. We need education access for working children. We need legal protection for women's earnings. We need workhouse reform. We need the law to recognize that poverty is not a crime and exploitation is not a right. She looked around the chamber, met eyes of men who hated her and men who supported her and men who were still deciding. I know many of you believe women have no place in politics, that we should confine ourselves to drawing rooms and charity teas, that speaking here today violates every tradition you hold sacred. She paused. Good. Because your traditions built a system where children died in factories and women drowned in rivers, and the law protected killers over victims. If my being here violates tradition, then tradition needed violating. The silence after she finished felt alive. Then someone started clapping. Not Adrian, though he was standing, pride bright on his face. One of the working-class MPs who'd won election in the reform wave Elara's work had helped trigger. He stood, applauding. Then another. Another. Soon half the chamber was on its feet. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to show the tide was turning. The reforms passed, slowly, incrementally, but they passed. Education Act guaranteeing schooling for children regardless of class. Earnings Protection Act giving women legal right to their own wages. Workhouse Reform Act implementing oversight and humane conditions. Each victory small, each victory essential. You know what we've actually done? Adrian said one evening, reviewing the latest legislation. We've made the system acknowledge that the people it's supposed to serve actually matter. Is that revolution? Elara asked. Or just basic humanity? In England, that's definitely revolution. They laughed. They'd earned it. 10 years after her marriage, Elara received a letter from a woman she didn't know. Dear Your Grace, I'm writing from Manchester. I was a mill worker, 12 years old when I started, 14 when I lost 3 fingers to machinery, expected to die in poverty. Then your network opened here. They taught me to read, helped me find safer work, gave me a future I never thought I'd have. I'm 20 now. I'm a clerk. I earn enough to support myself and my mother. I'm alive and whole and hopeful. I'm not writing to thank you. I'm writing to tell you I'm not stopping. I'm organizing other women here, teaching them what you taught me, passing it forward. You didn't save me. You showed me I could save myself. That's what matters. Rebecca Hart. Elara read it 3 times, then showed Adrian. That's it, she said. That's what we were trying to build. Not dependency, not charity, just possibility. You built more than that, Adrian said gently. You built proof that the system can change, that individuals with power can choose to use it for something that matters. We built that. Together. Together, he agreed. 15 years after walking into a marriage designed to erase her, Elara Whitcomb Blackmore stood in the drawing room of the townhouse that had once felt like a tomb. Maps covered the walls showing network chapters across England and expanding into Scotland. Letters from women she'd never met describing how the movement had changed their lives. Newspapers, including their own, reporting on victories and ongoing fights. Adrian came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Regrets? He asked. None. Not even the part where you married a emotionally unavailable aristocrat who tried to keep you invisible? Especially not that part. If you'd been different, I might have stayed quiet, might have accepted being erased. And instead I refused to disappear and dragged you into actually caring about something. Best thing that ever happened to me, Adrian said quietly, getting dragged into caring. Elara leaned back against him, watched the city lights outside. Thousands of lives, thousands of stories. Many of them different now because she'd refused to accept that nothing could change. Do you think it's enough? She asked. Everything we've done. Is it enough? No, Adrian said honestly. It'll never be enough. There's always more to do, more people to help, more injustice to fight. That's not very comforting. No, but it's true. He turned her to face him. What we've done is prove it's possible, that the system can be challenged, that ordinary people can organize and demand change and win. And extraordinary women can refuse to be silenced, she added, especially extraordinary women. He kissed her forehead. The woman they couldn't silence became the force that changed everything. That's going to echo for generations. Elara thought about Rebecca Hart in Manchester, about women organizing in Birmingham and Liverpool and Edinburgh, about movements building on the foundation she'd laid, about how refusing to disappear had become proof that disappearing was never inevitable. I was meant to be forgotten, she said quietly. The girl married off to save her family. The Duchess who existed only to produce an heir. The woman who was supposed to vanish into aristocratic obscurity. And instead I made sure no one like me would ever be forgotten again. She meant it. The network would outlive her. The reforms would outlast her. The proof that change was possible would remain after she was gone. She hadn't just refused to be erased. She'd built something that made erasure impossible for thousands of women who came after. Outside, London continued its endless motion. Inside, 2 people who'd been strangers stood together, transformed by refusing to accept that power couldn't be used for purpose. We should probably go to bed, Adrian said eventually. Parliament session tomorrow. Webb wants to discuss the new housing legislation. Always more work, Elara agreed. Always. They walked upstairs together, partners, allies. Something deeper than either word could contain. The woman meant to disappear had become the woman they couldn't silence. And her voice, along with thousands of others she'd helped find their own, would keep echoing long after the people who tried to silence her were forgotten. That was victory. Not perfection, not completion, just the knowledge that she'd mattered, that she'd fought, that she'd refused to vanish. And that refusal had changed everything.